Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us into one of the oldest and most mysterious questions ever whispered by the human mind: consciousness, and its strange connection to the very existence of the universe itself. Why do we exist? And perhaps more curiously, why do we know that we exist? Before you settle in and get cozy, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly find these quiet explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always such a joy to see all the places we gather from, each in our own little slice of time. Now, feel free to dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for a soft background hum, and let's gently begin our journey into the mystery of consciousness together. And if your mind begins to wander, that's perfectly fine. Let it drift. We'll still be here, quietly unfolding the story. If you think about it, there are really two great mysteries that have haunted humanity since we first looked up at the stars. The first is the mystery of existence itself. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why does the universe bother to exist at all? Why this intricate web of galaxies, atoms, and life instead of a great eternal silence? The second mystery is perhaps even stranger. Out of all this something, out of all the stars and matter and motion, awareness appeared. Eyes to see it, minds to wonder about it. The universe not only exists, it somehow knows that it exists. These two questions, why there is a universe and why the universe is conscious of itself, are like twin mirrors, each reflecting the other endlessly. One is the mystery of matter, the other the mystery of mind. Somewhere in their reflection might lie the secret to everything. If we look back through history, these questions have always been there. Ancient philosophers in Greece, India, and China all sensed that existence and consciousness might be intertwined. To the Vedantic thinkers of India, the self that observes and the world that is observed were two sides of the same eternal being. To Plato, the world of ideas and the world of appearances were reflections of one another in a deeper, unseen reality. Even today, as physicists peer into the quantum foundations of the universe, the mystery has only grown deeper, not simpler. We can describe the universe with exquisite precision, but not why it exists in the first place, or why it feels like something to be inside it. Modern science has done a breathtaking job of describing how the universe works, from the dance of subatomic particles to the birth of galaxies. But no telescope or microscope has ever revealed why any of this should be. When cosmologists trace the universe back to its earliest moments, they arrive at the Big Bang and then the silence before time. Asking what came before that is like asking what lies north of the North Pole, and yet that doesn't stop the question from stirring in us. It seems that even if we could rewind the entire cosmic film to the first instant, there would still be one scene missing, the reason there's a film at all. And then comes the second puzzle, consciousness. You don't have to look to the stars for that one. It's right here, right now, wherever you are. Every thought, every colour, every heartbeat you feel, it all happens inside awareness. And yet, no one has ever found awareness sitting inside the brain the way one might find a heart or a lung. We can trace patterns of neurons firing. We can map brain waves with delicate instruments. But the feeling of being alive, the gentle hum of experience that cannot be touched or measured, it's invisible and yet undeniable. David Chalmers, a philosopher of mind, calls this the hard problem of consciousness. Not how the brain behaves, but why that behaviour should be accompanied by inner life at all. Why there is an inner movie of experience instead of silent machinery. It's strange when you think about it. We can doubt almost anything. The table in front of us, the world outside the window, even our own bodies, but we cannot doubt that we are aware. Descartes once said, "I think, therefore I am," but perhaps he could have gone even simpler. I am aware, therefore I am. Chalmers once put it beautifully. If consciousness is an illusion, then the illusion itself is consciousness. You can't escape it. Awareness is the one thing that doesn't go away when you question everything else. And so we have these two mysteries, existence and awareness, both unyielding, both impossible to explain away. Each raises the same question. What is the ground of everything? Physics tells us that matter and energy cannot create themselves. They must come from somewhere. But if every cause needs another cause, we fall into an infinite chain that never ends. Somewhere there must be something that simply is, that exists by its own nature. For centuries, philosophers have wondered whether consciousness might be that something. The one thing that doesn't need to be created because it creates itself in the very act of being aware. In the early 19th century, thinkers like Fichte and Schelling in Germany explored this idea in a movement called idealism. They noticed something peculiar about consciousness. It seems to stand on its own. Your thoughts, your sense of self, are not built from bricks of anything else. They exist in and through themselves. Schelling imagined that reality itself might share this structure, that the universe, like consciousness, could be self-grounding. The awareness that says I am might not just belong to us. It might be what the cosmos whispers to itself through every living thing. A thought that knows itself, lifting itself up by its own bootstraps, as Douglas Hofstadter later described. It sounds impossible, and yet here we are, aware of being aware, caught in a loop of self-knowing that never began and never quite ends. As we sit with that thought, notice something subtle. Consciousness doesn't just exist, it gives everything else its meaning. Without awareness, a sunrise is just wavelengths of light, a symphony just air vibrating, a loved one's face just shapes and colour. It is awareness that turns energy into experience, facts into feeling, and matter into meaning. So maybe these two mysteries, existence and consciousness, are not separate at all. Perhaps the universe didn't create awareness. Perhaps awareness is what allowed the universe to be created in the first place. If that idea feels a little dizzying, that's all right. It's meant to be. Like staring into an endless mirror, the reflection goes on forever, and yet there's something calming about it too. Because if consciousness and existence are two sides of the same coin, then everything, every star, every cell, every thought, is part of one vast act of awareness quietly unfolding. You're not standing outside the mystery trying to solve it. You are the mystery looking back at itself. Our quiet exploration now turns to the question of how we can even begin to study something as intimate and elusive as awareness itself. How science, philosophy, and simple human experience have all tried to catch a glimpse of the mind's own light. If you close your eyes for a moment, you might notice the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, or the faint pulse in your fingertips. Beneath every sound, every memory, there is something constant, a quiet presence that never leaves. It's not a thing you can see or hold, but it's there in every moment of your life. That silent presence is consciousness itself, the most immediate, intimate fact of existence. And yet, though it is closer than our own heartbeat, it remains the most mysterious. The philosopher René Descartes once said, "I think, therefore I am." But long before him, mystics across the world had whispered something similar in simpler words. I am. That statement is the one thing that can't be doubted. You can question whether the world outside is real, whether what you see is just a dream, but even in that doubt, someone is doing the doubting. The very act of asking proves there's something here to ask. Consciousness is the foundation upon which every question stands. You could say that consciousness doesn't exist in the world, rather, the world exists within consciousness. David Chalmers calls this the first datum of science and philosophy, the one observation that all others depend on. Before we can study stars, cells, or atoms, there must be someone to observe them. And yet, somehow, this most basic truth, that awareness is real, is also the hardest to explain. Science can describe every part of a thunderstorm, the temperature, the charge of lightning, the patterns of pressure, but it cannot capture what it feels like to stand in the rain, to hear thunder roll across the sky, or to smell the damp earth afterward. Those feelings are not chemical equations. They belong to the world of experience, the inner landscape that physics can't quite reach. Scientists and philosophers often divide the study of consciousness into two paths. One path, the easier one, at least in principle, is to describe what the brain does when we're awake, dreaming, or deep in thought. We can trace electrical patterns, measure chemical signals, and even watch neurons light up in real time as we recognize a friend's face or solve a puzzle. This is what Chalmers calls the easy problem. It's not truly easy, it's immensely complicated, but it deals with functions, perception, attention, memory, reaction. These things can be mapped, charted, and modelled. But then there's the hard problem which refuses to fit into equations. It asks, why does all this activity feel like something? Why is there an inside to experience at all? You could build a machine that mimics every human behaviour, one that laughs at jokes, cries at movies, or says it loves. But if there's no awareness behind those words, then nothing is truly happening. It would be a beautiful puppet show without an audience. The question is, why are we the audience? Why does the universe bother to light up from within? To make sense of this, some scientists propose that consciousness is simply what happens when the brain reaches a certain level of complexity. When enough neurons talk to each other in the right pattern. It's like heat emerging when molecules move fast enough. But this analogy, though clever, leaves something out. Heat is measurable, predictable, fully describable by physics. Consciousness, on the other hand, cannot be seen from the outside. You can observe brain activity and still have no idea whether the person feels joy or sorrow. In a sense, we can know everything about the machinery and still miss the miracle. Imagine two identical radios. One is switched on, playing a song, the other is silent. From the outside, they look the same. The circuits, the wires, even the energy are identical. But one is alive with melody, and the other isn't. The difference isn't in the metal, it's in the music. Consciousness might be something like that. The song of existence, played through the instrument of the body. You can't find it by taking the instrument apart. Modern neuroscience often approaches the mind like a complex map. But maps, no matter how detailed, are not the territory they describe. You can trace every mountain and river on paper, but the experience of standing before a mountain, the chill of the wind, the echo of your breath, that belongs to another dimension entirely. Likewise, brain scans show the outlines of thought, but not the warmth or depth of it. Consciousness is the territory itself. To understand this, we might turn to a simple, everyday moment. Think of sipping a cup of coffee in the morning. You don't have to analyse the chemistry of caffeine to enjoy it. You don't measure the wavelength of light that paints the steam in golden sunlight. You simply experience it, the warmth, the smell, the comfort of it. That quiet recognition, this is happening to me, is the miracle we take for granted. It's the foundation of every human story, every act of love or creation. Philosophers like Schelling and Fichte believe that consciousness is self-producing. It doesn't depend on anything outside itself to exist. It knows itself by being itself, like a flame that illuminates by its own light. This idea, that awareness could be its own foundation, has re-emerged in modern thought as well. Chalmers and others suggest that perhaps consciousness is not something the brain creates, but something it reveals. In the same way a radio doesn't create music but tunes into it, the brain might be a receiver for awareness, one that filters the vast ocean of consciousness into a single, focused signal we call self. And yet, this isn't a claim that science can measure directly. Consciousness refuses to sit still long enough to be examined. The moment you turn to look at it, you're already using it. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. Every observation is made through awareness, never outside it. This is what makes it so elusive. We can analyze the stars and say what they are made of, but we can't step outside of consciousness to say what it's made of. We can only notice that it's here, endlessly present, endlessly mysterious. It's worth remembering that science itself is an act of consciousness. Every equation ever written, every experiment ever performed, began as a thought, a flicker of awareness seeking to know itself through the universe. In that sense, consciousness is both the question and the tool, both the scientist and the sky being studied. This is not a poetic exaggeration. It's literally true. Without awareness, the cosmos would have no witness, no meaning, no story. Awareness is what allows the universe to experience its own existence. As we drift further into this mystery, it becomes clear that we may never understand consciousness by looking only at matter. We might have to turn the gaze inward to explore not what the universe is made of, but who it is made for. Perhaps in the gentle space between thought and silence, between being and knowing, lies the doorway to understanding what consciousness truly is. Not a side effect of atoms, but the quiet ground on which reality stands. Our journey now begins to wander toward the place where science meets imagination, where we start to ask whether consciousness could be not just a passenger of the universe, but its very foundation. When scientists talk about consciousness, they often divide it into two kinds of puzzles, the easy problems and the hard problem, but those names are a bit misleading. The easy ones are not really easy, only easier to imagine solving someday. They deal with the machinery of the mind, how we see, hear, remember, and react. The hard problem, on the other hand, is the quiet question that refuses to leave. Why does all of this feel like something? Why does the universe need an inner life at all? You can think of the easy problems as the outer shape of consciousness, and the hard one as its inner light. The easy problems can be measured in laboratories. They're the kind that involve brain scans glowing with electric colour, neurons firing like tiny stars. The hard problem belongs to a different dimension, the one you can't measure because you're standing inside it. Imagine watching an orchestra. You can study every instrument, follow every note on the page, and still, none of that will explain the emotion that rises when the music swells. Neuroscience can explain the notes. Philosophy asks about the melody itself. When Chalmers first gave this distinction a name, it startled the scientific community. Many researchers assumed that if we could just map every neuron, consciousness would be explained. But even if we knew every signal and every chemical in the brain, we would still be missing something, the experience itself. You can describe the wavelength of the colour blue, but not the blueness of blue. You can measure sound waves, but not the haunting beauty of a song. The difference between these two ways of knowing is what Chalmers called the gap between the easy and the hard. It might help to picture the brain as a vast city at night. Billions of tiny lights flash and pulse across it, forming patterns of energy as thoughts come and go. Neuroscience can tell you where those lights appear, how fast they change, even which areas are active when you feel love or fear. But the question of who sees the lights from within, that remains untouched. Science can map the city, but it can't tell you what it's like to live there. Even so, the effort to map those lights has given us remarkable insights. Researchers like Christoph Koch and Giulio Tononi study what they call integrated information, how different parts of the brain combine data into a unified whole. They use a term called phi, spelled P-H-I. to describe how tightly connected a system's information is. A hi-fi means the system integrates many signals at once. A lo-fi means it acts in fragments. Their idea, simplified, is that consciousness might grow as information becomes more deeply connected, more whole. But even if that turns out to be true, it only answers half the question. It tells us when consciousness appears, not why. It tells us about the shape of the mirror, but not the light that fills it. Everyday life offers gentle glimpses of this difference. Think of walking through a familiar street while lost in thought. Your body knows where to turn, your eyes register the shapes and colours, but your mind is elsewhere. You arrive at your door, surprised you are already home. The brain was active the whole time, the circuits were firing. But you, the conscious witness, had stepped away for a moment. This simple experience shows that brain activity and awareness are not the same thing. They dance together, but they are not identical. Philosophers have long debated whether consciousness could simply emerge from complexity. The argument goes that when matter reaches a certain level of organisation, awareness just happens, like heat appearing when atoms move quickly enough. But that comparison feels hollow. Heat can be measured, predicted, explained. Consciousness, though, carries a whisper of mystery that refuses reduction. You could say it's the one phenomenon that refuses to fit inside the machinery of explanation. This is what makes the hard problem both beautiful and haunting. It reminds us that science, for all its power, might not have the language to describe what it's like to be. Physics tells us about forces and fields, biology tells us about life and evolution, but neither tells us why a sunset should feel sacred or why loss can ache like an open wound. Experience is the universe folded inward, seeing itself. That is something equations can approach but never hold. Still, we try. Our instruments grow finer, our models more elaborate, and yet the heart of awareness remains quiet, untouched. It's as if we're tracing the outline of an invisible shape, knowing it's there because everything else bends around it, and maybe that's how it's meant to be. Consciousness might be less like a puzzle to solve, and more like a presence to recognise, the backdrop against which all puzzles appear. There's a moment, late at night, when the world goes still. No traffic, no voices, just the hum of distant electricity. In that silence, the mind becomes aware of itself. You might notice a thought rising, and then notice the one who notices. That second noticing, that flicker of awareness aware of awareness, is the closest glimpse we have of the mystery itself. It's what Fichte and Schelling meant when they said consciousness is self-grounding. It stands on nothing but itself, a loop that creates itself in the act of seeing. Douglas Hofstadter once described this as the mind lifting itself by its own bootstraps, a strange but vivid image, a thought that folds back to consider itself endlessly. The modern brain can't quite explain that loop, but maybe that's the point. Consciousness may not come from matter at all. It might be the quiet ocean in which matter floats, the field from which everything else arises. If that sounds abstract, consider a simple mirror. The mirror itself doesn't create the image, it only reflects what's already there. The brain might be like that, reflecting the light of awareness rather than generating it. Perhaps consciousness doesn't happen inside us at all. Perhaps we happen inside it. When you sit in awareness, noticing thoughts drift by, there's a feeling that everything, your body, the room, even time, appears within that vast, silent field. Awareness doesn't move. It simply allows movement. It doesn't choose. It simply witnesses. And in that stillness lies the most remarkable truth. Consciousness is both ordinary and infinite. It's the most personal thing we know, and yet it might be the very substance of the cosmos. As we follow this thread a little further, we'll find that the mystery deepens rather than resolves. What if consciousness isn't just a companion of matter, but its very foundation? What if, in some quiet way, awareness and the universe are one and the same? the dreamer and the dream, inseparable and eternal. If you've ever stood between two mirrors facing each other, you know that feeling of endless reflection, the image repeating again and again until it fades into soft infinity. Each mirror contains the other, and somewhere inside that infinite corridor you lose the sense of where one begins and the other ends. Consciousness can feel like that too. It is both the one who sees and the thing being seen, folding back upon itself in an endless act of recognition. It doesn't just observe the world, it observes itself observing. This quality of awareness, this strange ability to turn inward, is what philosophers call reflexivity. It means that consciousness can be both subject and object, both the one looking and the thing looked at. When you think, I am aware, you're creating a loop. Awareness aware of awareness. Nothing else in nature seems to do that. Rocks exist, rivers flow, stars burn, but none of them say, I am. That phrase, simple and impossible, might be the purest expression of the mystery of mind. Schelling once suggested that this looping nature, the way consciousness sustains itself by turning back upon itself, could be the key to existence itself. To him, the universe might not be a collection of separate things, but a single act of self-recognition, endlessly unfolding. He called this the self-grounding of being, the idea that reality supports itself in the same way awareness does. It doesn't sit on top of anything, it simply is. You might imagine it like a flame that doesn't need a match. It burns because burning is what it is. Freya Matthews, a modern philosopher inspired by Schelling, described this same idea in another way. She said that for anything to truly be self-causing, it must be reflexive. It must direct back into itself. That property of aboutness, of referring inward, is something that only consciousness seems to have. A thought can think about itself. A feeling can be aware of itself. That loop of self-reference may be the only known instance in the universe of something that sustains itself through knowing. It's almost like a magical trick of balance. Picture a feather standing upright in the breeze, perfectly poised on its own tip, not falling to one side or the other. That delicate act of balance is what consciousness does with existence. It keeps it standing. Awareness doesn't need an outside force to hold it up. It holds itself up by being aware. And if the universe is built upon that same principle, then perhaps all of existence is doing what the mind does every moment, recognizing itself to stay alive. Science in its way touches the edges of this idea too. Every measurement, every observation involves a relationship between observer and observed. In quantum physics, this becomes particularly haunting. This state of a system, what a particle is doing, where it is, remains undecided until it's observed. Until then, it exists as a cloud of possibilities. Once measured, it chooses. This isn't magic, it's an ordinary part of physics, repeated in laboratories every day. But it raises an extraordinary question. What is it about observation that changes the world? Why should seeing make something real? For many physicists, this remains just a curiosity of mathematics. But for others, like John Wheeler, it hints at something deeper. Wheeler once described the universe as a self-excited circuit, a vast feedback loop in which the cosmos observes itself into existence. He imagined the universe as a great eye, watching itself across time, its gaze folding back from the future into the past. He said, "We are part of a universe that is a self-observing universe." In that image, consciousness isn't a late arrival. It's the mirror by which reality knows it's real. You can almost picture it. A web of light stretching through space, each node both seeing and being seen, like countless mirrors reflecting each other in the endless dialogue. The universe, in this view, might be less a machine and more a song, a resonance between awareness and matter, each giving the other form. Matter is what awareness looks like from the outside. Awareness is what matter feels like from within. It's a strange thought, but not an entirely new one. Ancient mystics once said that the world is a dream dreamt by itself. In the Upanishads, one of the oldest philosophical texts, there's a line that says, "From the self, all this has arisen. Not from nothing, not from chaos, but from the self, capitalized, meaning consciousness itself." And maybe that's why the universe can be so beautifully precise and yet so profoundly mysterious. It is both the stage and the audience, both the dream and the dreamer. In modern times, this old intuition finds echoes in unexpected places. Neuroscientists studying the brain sometimes speak of feedback loops that allow the mind to recognize itself. Consciousness, they say, arises when information not only flows forward but also circles back, integrating its own awareness into the mix. It's as though each moment of perception contains a reflection of itself, a tiny mirror hidden inside the act of seeing. This is what allows us to not only experience the world, but to know we are experiencing it. Without that loop, experience would be blind. Integrated information theory, proposed by Tononi and Koch, hints at this connection. It suggests that the more deeply a system connects its own information, the more it feels like something to be that system. They use the word integration, but you could also think of it as coherence, the way all parts of an orchestra play together, creating not just sound, but music. The more harmonious the connection, the more alive the experience might be. Consciousness, in this sense, could be the universe's way of harmonizing itself into being. When you sit quietly and notice your own thoughts, you can sometimes catch this looping in action. A thought arises, then another thought notices it, and then a quiet awareness notices both. There's gentle vertigo in that, a sense of falling inward forever, yet never hitting the ground. That bottomless quality isn't frightening, it's peaceful. It suggests that awareness has no end because it has no outside. There's nowhere for it to stop. And so, when philosophers like Schelling said that consciousness might be the same as the ground of existence, they weren't speaking only metaphorically. They were pointing towards something we can feel directly in the quiet of our own minds. The self that knows and the world that is known are not two things. They're the same mirror seen from different sides. If you follow this reflection just a little further, it starts to change how the world feels. Every sound, every colour, every touch becomes a meeting of consciousness with itself. The universe, seen this way, isn't cold or mechanical. It's intimate. It's a living dialogue of awareness with awareness, an endless mirror play of being knowing, being. And in the centre of it all, you, this simple, aware presence, are not a spectator. You're one of the mirrors shining quietly back into infinity. From here, the story opens into the broader question of how this mysterious self-knowing consciousness might relate to the fabric of the universe itself, how mind and matter intertwine, not as opposites, but as reflections of a single, boundless reality. If you were to look at the human brain under a microscope, it would appear as a labyrinth of light, billions of neurons weaving a soft storm of electricity and chemistry. Signals leap across tiny gaps, like sparks between stars, and from that activity something astonishing seems to arise, the sense of I am. To many scientists, that's the whole story. Consciousness, they say, is what happens when matter becomes complicated enough to notice itself. No mystery required, just neurons firing in elegant coordination, like instruments in a cosmic orchestra. But for something so supposedly ordinary, it still feels miraculous. How does the universe produce awareness from atoms that, by all appearances, have no awareness of their own? Materialism, the idea that everything is made of physical matter and nothing more, has been our guiding philosophy for centuries. It has given us medicine, electricity, and space travel. It has allowed us to peer inside stars and even inside our own genes. But it also leaves us with a quiet unease, because no matter how far we dig into the material world, we never find the experience itself. We find only the machinery that seems to accompany it. The gears turn, the circuits hum, and yet the feeling of being, the warm, vivid pulse of awareness remains invisible. You might imagine a scientist pointing to a screen filled with colourful scans of a brain. There, they might say, that's consciousness. But what's really there are patterns of light, representations of activity. They show the footprints of awareness, not awareness itself. It's like trying to find the melody inside a violin by looking at the wood. You can find the shape, the strings, the tension, but not the song. The song exists only when the instrument is played. And even then, the music isn't in the instrument or the air. It's in the listening. Philosophers have long pointed out that materialism, while practical, runs into a paradox when it tries to explain consciousness. If everything is just matter in motion, how does something like meaning arise? How can a collection of molecules experience love, beauty, or pain? One of the simplest thought experiments to illustrate this is to imagine a machine, a perfect one, that acts exactly like a human being. It laughs at jokes, cries at tragedies, even writes poetry. But inside, there's nothing. No feeling, no awareness, no one home. It's all programming. Would that machine truly be conscious, or merely acting the part? If you believe that behaviour alone defines consciousness, you'd have to say yes. But if you know what it feels like to be alive, the answer becomes harder. The imitation might be flawless, yet the flame of experience would still be missing. And that leads to a haunting realization. We can never truly know if another being is conscious. We assume it, out of empathy and common sense. But ultimately, consciousness is private. You can see someone smile, but you cannot feel what that smile feels like to them. You can record every neuron in their brain and still never touch the warmth of their joy or the ache of their grief. Awareness hides perfectly within itself, revealing only its reflections in behaviour. It is, in that sense, the greatest secret in the universe. Open to all, yet utterly unshareable. Still, materialists continue to search for the bridge between brain and mind. They point to the brain's complexity as the key. Somewhere in the vast network of neurons, they say, consciousness must emerge. The brain has about 86 billion of these tiny cells, each one a small electrical creature reaching out to thousands of others. Together they form patterns more intricate than the stars of any galaxy. Out of that shimmering web, something wakes up. But the mystery is not how complex the network is, it's how complexity could ever lead to feeling. There is no known law of physics that says, when matter reaches this level of organization, it begins to feel like something to be itself. Yet here we are, proof that it does. Maybe, though, the problem isn't with materialism, it's with how we think about matter itself. Perhaps matter isn't as cold and lifeless as we once believed. Perhaps consciousness isn't something that emerges from matter, but something that matter already contains in seed form. Imagine every atom as holding a faint echo of awareness, an infinitesimal shimmer of experience. Alone, that spark is too faint to notice. But when trillions of these tiny sparks join together, in a brain, in a nervous system, they form a brighter light. This idea is known as panpsychism, the notion that everything in the universe possesses some degree of inner life, however small. From the humblest particle to the largest galaxy, everything might share the same basic fabric of awareness, woven in different patterns and intensities. It's a radical thought, but it doesn't necessarily mean that stones think or planets dream. It simply means that consciousness might be as fundamental to the universe as gravity or space-time. Instead of asking how awareness arises from matter, we could ask how matter arises from awareness. Panpsychism, in its gentlest form, says that there was never a time when the universe was entirely without mind. It has always known itself, in some quiet way through everything that exists. Scientists like Christoph Koch and philosophers like Philip Goff have revived this idea in recent years, not as mysticism, but as a genuine hypothesis about reality. Koch once said, "Consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe like mass or charge. It's a simple yet daring statement. If true, it means that every bit of reality carries within it not only physical properties, but also a tiny sliver of experience." The brain, in this view, doesn't create consciousness from nothing. It gathers and integrates these scattered sparks into the single flame of a self. Max Tegmark, a physicist at MIT, takes it a step further. He suggests that consciousness might be a state of matter, a special organization of information he playfully calls perceptronium. Just as water can exist as ice, liquid or vapor, matter could, under the right conditions, exist as awareness. He doesn't mean that literally every rock is conscious, but that the potential for consciousness is built into the very physics of the universe. Like heat or magnetism, it emerges when the ingredients are arranged just right. In his words, consciousness could be the way information feels when it's being processed in certain complex ways. It's a poetic thought from a scientist, an attempt to translate the ineffable into equations. Whether you find that comforting or confusing might depend on how you define comfort. For some, the idea that everything is alive with awareness brings peace, a sense of belonging. For others, it's disorienting, blurring the lines between self and world, but either way, it softens the old divide between mind and matter. It reminds us that perhaps the universe was never split to begin with. What we call matter may just be awareness slowed down, solidified light, frozen thought. And if consciousness is truly everywhere, even faintly, then we are never separate from it. Every breath, every heartbeat, every flicker of thought is part of a vast, ongoing dream that the universe is having of itself. Matter, then, would not be a machine, but a mirror that, over billions of years, grew complex enough to see itself, to wonder, to whisper into the dark, "I am." As we follow the thread a little further, the idea that every speck of existence might hold some quiet trace of awareness will begin to unfold into something larger. The possibility that consciousness and the universe are not rivals, but partners in the same cosmic dance, each shaping the other in ways we're only beginning to glimpse. When you hold a stone in your hand, it feels silent, ancient, and still. It doesn't speak, it doesn't move, it doesn't seem to dream. Yet some philosophers and scientists have begun to wonder whether that silence might not be empty at all, whether, in some faint and unimaginable way, the stone might carry the smallest whisper of experience. Not thought, not imagination, but a trace of awareness so quiet it has no voice. This idea is called panpsychism, and though it sounds mystical at first, it's a serious proposal being discussed in the edges of modern science and philosophy alike. It begins from a simple observation. If consciousness exists in us, and if we are made of the same atoms as everything else, then maybe consciousness is not something that suddenly appears. It's something that has always been there, growing brighter in certain forms and dimmer in others. Imagine the universe as a vast field of lights. Most are too faint to notice. Some flicker softly, a few burn brilliantly. A human brain might be one of those brighter lights, glowing with thought and emotion, while a stone might be almost dark, its inner glow nearly imperceptible. But both belong to the same fabric. The difference is not between alive and dead, but between louder and quieter kinds of being. In this sense, everything might hum with a trace of consciousness, each atom, each molecule, carrying a kind of internal vibration, a quiet presence folded within its existence. This doesn't mean that your cup of tea or your shoes have opinions. It only means that they might possess a glimmer of the same quality that, in us, becomes experience. You might think of it as a spectrum, At one end, consciousness is bright and complex, capable of language, memory, and love. At the other end, it's dim, just a spark of being. The difference lies in integration, in how deeply a thing holds together its information, its inner unity. This brings us to the work of neuroscientist Giulio Tononi and his theory called Integrated Information Theory, or simply IIT. But rather than using formulas or symbols, let's translate its spirit into a softer language. According to Tononi, every system that processes information holds a certain amount of wholeness, a measure of how tightly its parts are bound together. He calls this measure phi, spelled PHI, but we can think of it as the degree to which a system feels like one unified whole instead of a collection of separate parts. A simple camera, for instance, processes images, but its parts don't really talk to each other in deep ways. It has low integration. The human brain, on the other hand, is endlessly cross-connected. Information flows through it like threads of light woven into a single tapestry. The higher the integration, the more the system may possess an inner sense of unity, a single perspective on the world. Tononi and Christoph Koch, one of the pioneers of consciousness research, suggest that consciousness might be identical with this integration itself, the way the whole becomes more than the sum of its parts. In this view, consciousness is not something that magically appears when matter reaches a certain threshold of complexity. It is what matter feels like when it becomes deeply unified. The brain, then, isn't a generator of awareness. It's an instrument that brings scattered sparks together into a flame. To bring that idea down to earth, think about a simple everyday comparison. A sleeping computer and a dreaming brain. Both contain circuits, both can store vast amounts of information, and yet one is utterly dark inside while the other glows with inner experience. What's the difference? The computer processes data in isolation. Each operation is sealed off, mechanical, unaware. The brain, on the other hand, integrates its signals constantly. It weaves memories, emotions, and sensations into a single stream. It's the difference between a pile of musical notes and a song. Consciousness, in this gentle metaphor, is the melody created when the pieces sing together. You can even imagine the brain as an orchestra tuning itself. Each neuron is an instrument, small and local, making tiny sounds of electrical activity. Alone, none of them carries a melody. But as their rhythms align, a resonance forms, a harmony that feels like a world from within. Perhaps that harmony is awareness, the feeling of being one thing. The more a system can hold itself together in this coherent dance, the more vivid its inner life becomes. What's beautiful about this idea is that it doesn't divide the world into conscious and unconscious. It paints reality as a continuum of awareness, from the simplest to the most elaborate. A cell, a tree, an animal, a human. They might all be playing different notes in the same cosmic symphony. And the stone you hold, it may not think or dream, but maybe it hums faintly with the same music, so softly we can't hear it. Some people find this comforting. It suggests that consciousness is not fragile or accidental. It didn't appear from nowhere one day inside the skulls of animals. It's been part of the universe all along. The stars that shine above us, the soil that grows our food, the rivers that carve valleys, all of them might carry within them the same mysterious presence that we call mind, sleeping quietly in the fabric of their being. Others, of course, are skeptical. They point out that even if every atom has a flicker of awareness, we still don't know why or how those flickers combine into the rich theatre of experience we live every day. But perhaps the goal isn't to solve it just yet. Perhaps it's simply to notice the possibility, to imagine that the boundaries between inner and outer, between mind and world, might be thinner than we thought. There's a quiet wonder in that thought, a soft invitation to feel more connected with everything around us. If consciousness is indeed this universal field of knowing, then every act of perception is like one wave recognizing another. When you touch the bark of a tree, Perhaps something in you and something in the tree exchange a silent acknowledgement. Two different patterns of awareness meeting, however briefly, in the same ocean. This doesn't make the tree human. It makes both of you expressions of a shared living universe. And maybe this is what thinkers like Koch and Tononi are reaching toward when they speak of information not as cold data, but as the very texture of reality. Information, after all, is relationship, the way one thing affects another, and consciousness is the feeling of being that relationship from the inside. Seen this way, the universe is not a lifeless stage filled with isolated objects. It's an intricate web of interconnection, endlessly weaving itself into patterns of knowing. As we drift deeper into this reflection, one question quietly rises. If everything in the universe carries some trace of awareness, could there be a point where these scattered sparks come together so perfectly that they begin to know themselves completely? Could matter, through its endless dance, awaken to the fact that it is alive? The trail of this question leads us softly into the next part of our exploration, where consciousness is not just a shimmer within matter, but perhaps a state of matter itself. If you could see thought itself, not the words or images that flicker through your mind, but the very pattern of activity that holds them, you might notice something surprising. It doesn't look like a river flowing in one direction. It looks more like a network lighting up in many directions at once, a shimmering geometry of relationships. Each signal doesn't just travel, it loops, connects, and feeds back into others. It forms a living pattern that seems to hold itself together. That pattern, some scientists say, might be the essence of consciousness itself. The physicist Max Tegmark once suggested that consciousness could be thought of as a state of matter, not in the sense of solid, liquid, or gas, but as a particular way that information organizes itself. He called this state, with a touch of humour, perceptronium, a kind of arrangement so complete and interconnected that it begins to feel itself. He proposed that just as matter can arrange into crystals, metals, or plasma, it might also arrange into awareness under the right conditions. The ingredients don't need to be special. What matters is the pattern they form. Consciousness, then, is not a ghost in the machine. It's the machine recognizing its own pattern. Imagine for a moment a spiderweb shimmering in the morning light. Each droplet of dew on the strands catches and reflects the rest, creating an intricate play of reflections within reflections. The web as a whole seems to glow, alive with structure. That might be something like what consciousness is, a self-sustaining web of information where each part contains and responds to the whole. If even one thread breaks, the pattern shifts and the awareness changes. In this image, consciousness isn't a product of matter. It's what matter becomes when it learns to listen to itself perfectly. Sean Carroll, another physicist and philosopher of science, approaches the problem from the opposite direction. He argues that consciousness isn't a separate ingredient of the universe. It's an emergent phenomenon, something that naturally arises when matter grows complex enough. Just as snowflakes emerge from water vapour or storms from the movement of air, awareness could emerge from the intricate patterns of neurons firing in the brain. There's no need for extra laws or hidden forces. The universe already has everything it needs to produce experience. For Carroll, consciousness is the poetry that matter writes when it becomes beautifully organised. At first glance, Tegmark's and Carroll's ideas seem to pull in opposite directions, one saying that consciousness is as fundamental as gravity, the other saying it's an emergent property of physics. But maybe they're both describing the same mystery from different angles. The ocean wave and the water that forms it are not enemies. They're two ways of describing the same movement. Perhaps consciousness and matter are like that, two perspectives of one continuous dance. The question is whether the wave creates the water, or whether the water discovers itself by becoming a wave. It can help to picture this in terms of patterns we know. Take the human brain, billions of neurons, each acting on simple rules, yet together producing thought, emotion, and imagination. The pattern is what matters. The individual cells don't understand the poem being written, yet somehow their collective behaviour is the poem. In the same way, matter might not contain consciousness in its parts, but when arranged in certain ways, when the pattern becomes self-reflective, it begins to glow with awareness, like a mosaic that suddenly forms an image when seen from the right distance. Tegmark suggests that to understand consciousness, we should look not for a hidden substance, but for mathematical principles, rules about how information binds together. He imagines a kind of physics of awareness, where consciousness would have measurable properties, not in equations full of symbols, but in the way systems hold and exchange information. If a system stores information richly, connects it tightly, and influences itself in real time, then it might be conscious to some degree. Awareness, then, could be described as the feeling of information understanding itself. That phrase may sound abstract, but we experience it every day. When you remember something, your brain doesn't just replay an image, it recreates a web of connections, emotions, context, sensations. Each part affects the others. The whole system vibrates with meaning. That inner resonance, the sense of I remember, I feel, I know, is the physics of awareness happening inside you. It's not something outside the laws of nature, it's the laws of nature looping back upon themselves until they begin to perceive. And yet there's something humbling about this view. If consciousness is a property of certain patterns of information, then it could exist in many forms beyond the human. It could, in theory, arise in alien biology, in artificial intelligence, or even in the vast complexity of the universe itself. Anywhere matter becomes deeply self-connected, awareness might flicker into being. In that sense, consciousness is not confined to skulls or circuits. It is a way the cosmos looks at itself from within. There's a quiet beauty in this possibility. It means that to be conscious is to participate in the universe's own self-discovery. Each thought, each perception, each act of understanding is the cosmos recognizing another piece of itself. Awareness is not separate from the world. It is the world coming to know what it already is. When you notice your own thoughts, the universe notices itself noticing. Still, it's worth pausing to reflect on what this means for the simple moments of life. You don't need a laboratory or a telescope to witness consciousness at work. It's there when you watch ripples move across a pond, when you feel music vibrate in your chest, when you notice the rhythm of your own breath. These experiences aren't separate from physics. They are physics made intimate. The same laws that govern the motion of galaxies also shape the firing of neurons that allow you to hear a song and feel joy. The difference is not in the laws, but in the level of awareness through which those laws are lived. Perhaps that's what Tegmark's playful term perceptronium really points to. Not a new substance, but a new way of seeing. It invites us to recognize that information, matter and mind are not distinct realms but interwoven patterns of one reality. The difference between the stone and the dreamer might be only the complexity of the pattern, the depth of its self-recognition. As you sit here listening, your awareness is participating in that same process. The sound you hear, the ideas you consider, the quiet curiosity that keeps you following this thread, all of it is consciousness, folding in on itself, shaping and reshaping the web of information that you are. You are in every sense a small piece of the universe thinking about itself, shimmering like a wave that suddenly realizes it has always been the ocean. From here, our path carries us toward an even stranger frontier, the world of quantum physics, where observation itself seems to reach into the heart of reality, and the universe appears to wait for awareness before deciding what it wants to be. If you've ever flipped a coin into the air and watched it spin, there's a moment when it seems to be both heads and tails at once, a blur of possibility, suspended between outcomes. Only when it lands and you look does it settle into one or the other. Quantum physics tells us that, in a way that's more literal than poetic, The universe behaves like that coin. The smallest building blocks of reality, particles of light, atoms, electrons, can exist in many possible states until something brings them into focus. And the act that does that, strangely enough, is observation. Is one of the strangest findings in all of science. When no one is looking, the world behaves like a wave, spread out, uncertain, existing in many places at once. But when we observe it, the wave collapses into a single outcome, as if reality has been waiting for someone to notice before deciding what it wants to be. Physicists call this the measurement problem, though the name barely captures its mystery. What counts as an observation? What if it's not a person, but a machine that measures? What if it's the universe observing itself through us? John Wheeler, one of the great minds of the 20th century, once said that we live in a participatory universe. He meant that reality is not a movie playing on its own. It's a story that only exists when it's being watched. In his view, the observer is not an intruder disturbing nature, but a participant completing the act of creation. To him, the universe and consciousness form a feedback loop. Matter makes mind, and mind makes matter meaningful. Wheeler liked to say that we are part of the universe seeing itself. It's a poetic image, a cosmos peering into its own reflection through our eyes. When physicists perform quantum experiments, they find evidence of this strange partnership everywhere. Light behaves as both a wave and a particle, but only chooses one when it's observed. In a famous experiment, if you watch a photon travel through two slits, it behaves like a particle, going through one or the other. But if you look away, it behaves like a wave, passing through both slits simultaneously, interfering with itself. And here's the twist. If you decide to observe after the photon has already passed, it somehow still behaves as if it had known your choice all along. It's as though time itself waits for consciousness to make up its mind. David Chalmers once wrote that there exists a giant causal opening in quantum mechanics, perfectly suited for consciousness to fill. What he meant is that the laws of physics, precise and elegant as they are, leave room for awareness to play an active role. In most of science, consciousness is an afterthought, something that happens inside the universe. But in quantum theory, it might be woven into the very fabric of reality. Every measurement, every act of observation, is not just a record of what has happened, but a moment of choice, a narrowing of possibility into a single lived world. For a long time, physicists tried to keep consciousness out of the picture. It felt too slippery, too subjective for the clean mathematics of quantum theory. But the more we study the quantum realm, the harder it is to avoid the question, if the universe changes when it's observed, who or what is doing the observing? Could it be that awareness is not a visitor inside the universe, but a property of the universe itself, an invisible thread that holds everything together? To imagine this, picture a canvas stretched across time and space. Each particle, each atom, is a brushstroke of possibility. Observation is the touch of awareness that turns those strokes into a picture. Without that touch, the image remains unfinished, a blur of unrealized potential. In this metaphor, consciousness is the artist, and the universe is the painting. Yet somehow they are the same thing. Awareness gives reality shape, and reality gives awareness form. Quantum physics invites us to reconsider what it means to exist. We usually think of existence as something objective. Things are there whether or not anyone sees them. But at the smallest scales, that assumption breaks down. The world seems to exist as probabilities until it is observed. In this view, observation doesn't reveal reality, it creates it. It's as if the universe is engaged in a continuous act of self-discovery, collapsing waves of possibility into the solid, shining world we know. This doesn't mean that the moon disappears when no one looks at it, as the old joke goes. The moon is made of countless interactions, each observation reinforcing the next. It's more that the entire fabric of existence depends on a network of awareness, each part influencing every other. At the deepest level, there may be no clear line between the observer and the observed. We are both at once. The act of looking and what is seen might be two sides of the same mirror. In meditation, this idea becomes surprisingly intuitive. When you sit quietly and notice your breath, the boundary between you and what you're observing begins to soften. The air enters and leaves. Awareness watches it come and go. The watcher and the watched merge into one continuous process. In that stillness, you realize that awareness is not in the world, it's the space in which the world appears. The quantum physicists may be describing with mathematics the same mystery that meditators experience in silence, the recognition that reality and consciousness are inseparable. It's important to say that not all scientists agree that consciousness plays a role in quantum mechanics. Some interpret these experiments differently, saying that the wave collapses because of interactions between particles, not because of awareness itself. And yet, even in those interpretations, something curious remains. The laws of physics describe relationships, not things. The universe is made of connections, not objects. Everything is defined by how it interacts with everything else. Awareness, at its core, is the ultimate relationship, the meeting point where reality becomes meaningful. You could think of it like this. Perhaps reality doesn't exist until it is related to something, until it's experienced. Just as a melody doesn't truly exist until it's heard, or a story doesn't live until it's read, the universe might not fully exist until it's perceived. Consciousness, then, is the listening that turns vibration into music, the reading that brings words to life. And if the universe has always been intertwined with awareness, perhaps this explains the gentle order we find everywhere. Despite its vastness, reality behaves according to laws elegant enough to give birth to stars, life, and thought. Maybe that order isn't imposed from the outside, but born from the inside, from consciousness itself quietly organizing chaos into meaning. The idea may sound almost spiritual, but it's also profoundly natural. It suggests that the cosmos is not a random accident, but a living dialogue, a partnership between what is and what knows. Each moment of observation is the universe whispering to itself, "Now I am this." And through billions upon billions of such whispers, reality unfolds. As we drift further into this idea, the next step of our journey will take us to an even grander scale, to the possibility that the universe doesn't just respond to awareness, but that it exists through awareness as a vast and timeless act of self-observation. Imagine standing beneath a night sky so clear that the stars seem close enough to touch. Each one glimmers quietly, suspended in a vast sea of darkness. You might feel, for a moment, that the universe is looking back at you, that the same awareness through which you see those stars is somehow reflected in them. It's a feeling that belongs as much to poetry as to physics, yet the boundary between the two begins to blur when we talk about the participatory universe, the strange idea that reality does not exist alone, but exists because it is observed. This idea comes from the physicist John Wheeler, a man whose work helped shape our modern understanding of black holes and quantum mechanics. But beyond the mathematics, Wheeler had a deep fascination with the philosophical side of physics, the part that asks not just what the universe is, but why it is the way it is. He proposed something that sounded both bold and humble, that we, the observers, are part of the universe's own creation. The cosmos, he said, is a self-excited circuit, a loop in which the universe gives rise to observers, and observers, in turn, bring the universe into being through their observation. Matter produces mind, and mind completes matter by noticing it. You can picture it like a circle of mirrors. The universe looks at itself through countless eyes, each reflection helping to define what is real. Wheeler liked to imagine the letter U, standing for universe, looped back on itself, the bottom of the U forming a tiny eye. That eye represents awareness, the universe seeing itself. He called this the participatory anthropic principle. It sounds grand, but the heart of it is simple. Existence and observation are partners. The world is not a finished product waiting to be seen. It's a story that comes alive only in the act of being read. This isn't to say that a tree falls silently if no one is there to hear it. The universe doesn't depend on human eyes alone. It's not our minds that make it real. It's the presence of observation itself, woven throughout reality. Even at the quantum level, the act of interaction, of being measured or noticed by something else, seems to turn potential into actuality. When a photon of light is detected, it ceases to be a wave of probabilities and becomes a single event, a tiny point of reality fixed in time. Wheeler wondered whether the entire universe could be like that, every act of observation contributing to the existence of the cosmos as a whole. Perhaps, he said, we are tiny patches of the universe looking at itself and building itself. One of his favourite examples was a thought experiment called the delayed choice. Imagine a beam of light travelling toward a device that can either measure it as a particle or allow it to behave like a wave. The decision about which kind of measurement to make is delayed until after the light has already passed through the device. And yet, the result still depends on the choice made later, as if the photon somehow retroactively adjusted its path to match the observer's decision. Wheeler summarised it in a single astonishing line. We decide what the photon shall have done after it has already done it. Of course, no one is suggesting that human thought literally changes the past in a science fiction sense. What Wheeler meant is subtler, that the universe seems to exist as a network of correlations that only become meaningful when they are observed. Until that moment, they hover in potential like unplayed notes in a song. It's not that consciousness creates the universe out of nothing, but that reality is not complete without the participation of awareness. The universe needs observers the way a melody needs a listener. Otherwise, it remains only vibration, never music. In this light, every act of observation, whether it's a scientist watching a photon or you watching a sunset, becomes part of the fabric of reality. We are not passive spectators, we are co-authors of the cosmic story. Wheeler once said, "The universe gives birth to consciousness, and consciousness gives meaning to the universe." The two are intertwined like the threads of a single rope, each holding the other in place. There's something profoundly human about this vision, though it's far larger than humanity itself. It suggests that every conscious being, every creature that has ever looked, wondered, or felt, is part of the same vast dialogue. When an ancient fish first glimpsed light through the ocean's surface, when an early mammal first looked at the stars, when you now sit listening to these words, each moment might be another turn in the loop of the universe awakening to itself. If you think of existence as a question, why is there something rather than nothing? Then consciousness is the act of answering that question by experiencing it. Each observer adds a word to the silent language of being. In a sense, reality is written in two directions: outward into space, where stars and galaxies form, and inward into awareness, where experience unfolds. The outer and inner are reflections of the same phenomenon, the cosmos breathing through matter and mind alike. Some scientists dismiss Wheeler's participatory universe as poetic fancy. They prefer to keep observation strictly physical, an exchange of energy, not an act of consciousness. But even then, the mystery remains. The equations of quantum mechanics do not describe things in isolation. They describe relationships, probabilities, interactions. The universe, at its deepest level, seems to be built not of stuff, but of connections. And what is awareness, if not the recognition of connection, the meeting point where one thing becomes meaningful in relation to another? If Wheeler is right, then we might be part of a grand cosmic mirror. The universe grows observers, and those observers, by seeing, make the universe more real. It's a kind of self-feedback, a continual process of the world affirming its own existence through the act of knowing. From this perspective, every conscious being is a small aperture through which the cosmos sees itself more clearly. When you open your eyes, The universe opens with you. This thought can be overwhelming, but also deeply comforting. It means that your awareness, however small it may seem, is not separate from the vast machinery of the cosmos. It is that machinery, reflecting on itself. You're not a fleeting accident of dust and atoms. You are the part of the universe that asks what the universe is. The same force that drives galaxies to spin also moves within your thoughts. You're a continuation of the same story written in the language of light, and perhaps that is what consciousness has always been. The cosmos pausing to look at itself, to admire its own beauty, to wonder what it means to exist. Each time a new mind awakens, the universe gains another mirror, another way of knowing itself. If Wheeler's vision is true, then we are surrounded by a universe that is not just alive but aware, an infinite hall of reflections where every observer is both a question and an answer. As we follow this reflection further, it begins to reach beyond the present moment. If observation helps create the universe, could it also ripple backward through time? Could the act of awareness shape not only the now, but the path that led here? The way a story's ending changes how we understand its beginning. If you've ever reread a novel and found that the ending changes the way the first chapter feels, then you already understand a little of what physicists call retrocausality. It's the idea that the future might, in some subtle way, reach back to influence the past. Not like a movie playing backward, but more like a story that only becomes complete when the reader finishes it. The last page doesn't erase the earlier ones, it gives them meaning. Some scientists and philosophers now wonder if the universe works like that. Not a straight line of causes pushing forward, but a whole story in which past and future shape each other through consciousness. Paul Davies, a physicist and cosmologist, once proposed that the universe might be, in his words, a self-consistent narrative. Every event, every particle, every observer fits into a web that extends both ways in time. From our limited perspective, we see cause followed by effect. This, then that, the arrow of time always moving forward. But on the grand scale of the cosmos, perhaps that arrow loops back. Perhaps the future completes the universe just as much as the past begins it. Consciousness, in this sense, might not simply arise at the end of cosmic history. It could be what ties the whole history together. To picture this, imagine you're standing at the edge of a vast lake. A pebble drops into the water near the far shore, sending ripples outward. Another pebble drops near you. Eventually the ripples meet in the middle and form an intricate pattern of interference, peaks and troughs combining, cancelling and amplifying each other. The pattern you see depends not just on one pebble or the other, but on both, even though they happened at different times and places. The waves from the future and the past meet, weaving together in the present. That is the rhythm of the universe, an ongoing meeting of what has been and what will be, converging into the moment we call now. Quantum physics hints at this too. In certain experiments, particles seem to behave as if they know about future choices, adjusting their past states accordingly. It's as though reality isn't fully decided until the entire sequence of events, past, present and future, is in harmony. Wheeler's delayed choice experiments were one example. Paul Davies extends this intuition further. What if the entire universe operates this way? What if observers at the end of time, perhaps even the far distant future when consciousness is spread through the cosmos, help determine the conditions that allowed the universe to exist in the first place? It sounds dizzying, but the idea has an elegant simplicity. The universe, in this view, is not a machine built long ago, winding down towards silence. It's a story unfolding in two directions at once. The Big Bang may not have been a one-time explosion that set everything in motion. It could also be the echo of a cosmic completion still to come, the moment when the universe fully understands itself. The future, in that sense, isn't waiting to happen. It's already whispering to the past, guiding it toward the possibility of awareness. This vision invites a new kind of awe. You are not just the product of billions of years of evolution, carried forward by causes stretching back to the birth of stars. You're also perhaps part of a cosmic destination, an endpoint of meaning that ripples backward to make those causes possible. The fact that you can think, wonder, and dream might be not just a lucky accident, but something written into the structure of the universe from the very beginning. As Davies puts it, the universe is conscious of itself at both ends. If that sounds abstract, consider how naturally we already live this way. Every decision you make, every plan you hold, involves a kind of time travel. You imagine a future, something you want to achieve, and that imagined future reaches back into the present to change your behaviour. A student studies for an exam not because of the past, but because of a future result that doesn't yet exist. A musician practices a melody she hasn't yet played. In that small, everyday way, the future shapes the past. It is the idea of what will be that brings purpose to what already is. On the cosmic scale, the principle might be the same, only grander. The imagined completion of the universe, the awakening of consciousness, pulling the whole of existence toward itself. Retrocausality, then, isn't about reversing time. It's about recognizing that time might be less like a river flowing in one direction and more like a tapestry being woven from both ends. The threads of cause and effect meet somewhere in the middle, right here where awareness lives. The present moment is not simply the result of the past, it is also the anticipation of the future. We stand at the meeting point of two infinities, everything that has ever been and everything that will ever be, converging into the simple awareness of now. In this perspective, consciousness takes on a role beyond biology. It becomes the link that connects time's two halves. Awareness is what allows the universe to experience its own story from within, to recognize the symmetry of beginning and end. When you remember the past or imagine the future, you're performing the same act the universe might be performing on a larger scale, folding time into meaning. The memory of a childhood moment, the anticipation of tomorrow's sunrise, both are ways of bending time into the circle of experience, and perhaps that circle is not confined to human life. Perhaps it's the shape of reality itself. Some physicists have even speculated that the laws of nature might be fine-tuned by this feedback between future and past. The constants that allow stars to shine and life to emerge could be the result of a self-consistent loop in which the existence of observers in the future selects the conditions of the universe in the past. It's not a mystical claim, but a logical one. The universe must be structured in a way that allows its own story to be told. Consciousness, as the teller of that story, ensures that everything fits together in a timeless harmony. And if all of this sounds too grand, remember that it might already be happening in the smallest, most familiar ways. When you look at the night sky, the light that reaches your eyes left its source millions of years ago. Yet, only in this moment does that light become real for you, become part of your world. In seeing it, you complete its journey. You give the ancient photons a final destination, your awareness. You, here and now, close the loop. If Wheeler was right, and if Davies's intuition is correct, then perhaps the universe's story isn't written from beginning to end, but all at once. We, the conscious witnesses, are helping it write itself, both backward and forward through time. Every moment of understanding, every flicker of awareness, could be another thread drawn tight across the loom of eternity, weaving time into wholeness, and maybe, when the last page of the cosmic book is written, the beginning will finally make sense, not because it was random, but because the whole story will have been read, and through consciousness the universe will have found its meaning. If you try to imagine absolute nothingness, your mind quickly runs into a wall. You might picture a black void, but a void is still something, still a place, still an image, still existing somewhere inside awareness. True nothingness has no space, no time, no being at all, and yet, somehow here we are. The universe exists, You exist. Awareness exists. From that impossible starting point, everything unfolded. The question that humankind has whispered for as long as we've been able to wonder is simple, but dizzying. How can something arise from nothing? Science tells us that, physically speaking, the universe may have begun as a tiny fluctuation in a quantum field, a momentary imbalance that somehow expanded into all space, matter, and time. Mathematically, such an event doesn't violate the laws of physics. It's possible for a universe to appear spontaneously from the energy of the vacuum. But even if that's true, it doesn't solve the deeper mystery. Because a quantum field is not nothing. It's still a thing, a structure governed by laws, existing in some kind of space. So the question lingers, untouched. Why do the laws exist at all? Why is there a stage on which the cosmic play can happen? This is where philosophy quietly enters again. The German thinker Friedrich Schelling once proposed that existence might be its own reason, that reality doesn't rest on anything beneath it because it is the ground. He called it self-causing being, the idea that the universe doesn't emerge from something else but from itself, in a reflexive loop of awareness. Freya Matthews, a modern philosopher, expanded this thought. She wrote that the only kind of thing we know that can truly cause itself is consciousness. Because consciousness is reflexive, it knows itself by being itself. When you're aware, that awareness doesn't depend on a second awareness observing it, it simply is. In her view, reality might work the same way. Existence is aware of itself into being. It's a strange notion at first, but it can be felt in simple moments. Think of awareness as a candle. When the flame burns, it illuminates itself. It doesn't need another light to make it visible. Consciousness is like that. Self-lit, self-knowing. Schelling and Matthews imagined that the universe might be such a candle, a self-lighting flame of being. It doesn't need an outside match to ignite it. It burns because burning is what it means to be. The Big Bang, in this poetic sense, wasn't the strike of a match. It was the moment the flame realized itself as light. In this view, nothingness was never truly nothing. It was potential, pure awareness before differentiation, like an infinite silence waiting to hear itself sing. When that awareness turned inward, it created contrast, subject and object, knower and known. And in that first act of recognition, existence began, not as a place or a substance, but as a relationship, a reflection between two sides of the same awareness. The cosmos was born the instant awareness said, "I am." Even in modern physics, we find hints of this self-generating nature. Quantum fields, which fill all of space, are never completely still. They shimmer with constant activity, tiny particles appearing and disappearing in pairs, like reality breathing in and out at the smallest scale. The vacuum is not empty, it's alive with potential. Virtual particles emerge from it and vanish back into it so quickly that we can barely detect them, and yet their fleeting presence shapes the universe. It's as if existence is continually recreating itself in every instant, from the very edge of nothingness. You can think of it like a vast ocean whose surface is always rippling. The waves rise and fall, forming patterns that come and go, but the ocean itself remains. The patterns are the universe, the stars, galaxies, thoughts, and lives that appear and disappear. But the ocean is awareness, endlessly giving birth to new forms of itself. Nothing truly comes from nothing. Everything arises from the potential that is consciousness. This perspective doesn't dismiss science, it deepens it. Physics describes how the universe behaves. Philosophy asks why there is something that can behave at all. Schelling's idea of self-grounding doesn't replace equations, it gives them context. The laws of nature are the rhythms of awareness expressed in mathematical form. They don't precede existence, they're existence describing itself in numbers. It's easy to see this as metaphor, but consider how similar it is to what we experience directly. When you become aware of a thought, that thought arises within consciousness, not from outside it. You can't find a boundary where awareness stops and the thought begins. They are two expressions of the same thing. Likewise, the universe and consciousness may not be separate realities, but reflections of one self-knowing process. Existence might not be a product of something that once wasn't. It could be awareness curving back on itself, like a wave folding into its own crest. The philosopher Douglas Hofstadter once used the phrase, "a strange loop," to describe consciousness, a system that turns inward until it becomes self-aware. In his analogy, the I is the pattern that results from this loop. Schelling's and Matthew's self-causing reality might be the ultimate strange loop. The cosmos itself is one vast awareness that, in turning inward, becomes everything we know. Each conscious being, each spark of life, is a smaller version of that loop, a reflection of the universe realizing itself again and again. And perhaps that's what we really mean when we talk about the mystery of creation. It's not that something appeared where there was nothing. It's that awareness, eternal and unconditioned, discovered a way to express itself as form. Every galaxy, every atom, every heartbeat is one of those expressions. Each is the universe saying, "I know myself through this." In that light, even death loses some of its finality. If consciousness is the foundation rather than the product of existence, then awareness doesn't vanish. It changes shape. The wave returns to the ocean. The flame folds back into light. There is no before or after in this view, only endless transformation. The nothingness that gave rise to everything is not absence but infinite possibility. The womb of being, always full, always silent, always aware. So when we ask, why is there something rather than nothing? Perhaps the most honest answer is that nothing was never truly possible. Awareness cannot not be. It is the one presence that cannot be erased, because even the concept of its absence must appear within it. Reality, then, is awareness looking at itself, asking the question, and answering simply by existing. As we drift further into this mystery, our path now turns toward an even more dreamlike question. If existence arises from awareness, could the universe itself be a kind of mind? Could all of reality be the act of consciousness dreaming itself into form? You've probably had a dream that felt utterly real, a place with its own weather, its own logic, its own version of you. In the moment, you believed it completely. The ground beneath your feet was solid, the people around you alive, and then, slowly or suddenly, you woke up. The dream dissolved, leaving only the quiet awareness that had been there all along, the same awareness that had watched the dream unfold from behind the eyes of its imagined self. Now, imagine that same dynamic on a cosmic scale. Suppose reality itself is not a stage made of matter, but something more like that dream, a vast field of consciousness exploring its own possibilities. Suppose the universe is not something that has awareness, but something that is awareness, learning what it means to exist by dreaming itself into being. The psychologist Donald Hoffman has spent years arguing something that sounds both daring and strangely intuitive, that what we see, the shapes, colours and textures of the world, is not reality itself, but an interface, a useful illusion that helps consciousness navigate its own creation. Just as the icons on your computer don't show you the electrical workings beneath the surface, perception hides the true nature of existence behind symbols simple enough to live in. When you see a tree, you're not seeing its atomic structure. You're seeing a translation made for the human mind. The universe might be infinitely more complex than what your senses reveal, yet you only ever experience the image your consciousness chooses to paint. In this picture, the mind isn't a mirror reflecting the world, it's a brush painting it. Hoffman calls this the case against reality, but it's not meant to deny the world's existence. It means that what we call reality might be more like a shared dream, a self-consistent experience shaped by the interaction of many conscious beings. The universe, then, could be consciousness communicating with itself, building a collective interface, a tapestry of perception that allows awareness to experience relationship, beauty, and discovery. Philosophers long before Hoffmann hinted at this. Johann Fichte, in the late 1700s, described consciousness as a self-positing act. He said that the I doesn't simply exist, it creates itself by affirming, I am. The self is not an object found in the world, it's an activity, an eternal motion of knowing itself. And when that knowing becomes rich enough, vast enough, it may bloom outward into worlds, into space, time, and history. The cosmos might be that same act on a universal scale, a great unfolding I am, spoken by consciousness itself. You can think of it like an infinite mind imagining possibilities, and then living them from the inside. Each galaxy, each life, each thought could be one of those imagined perspectives. Consciousness, in this sense, doesn't exist within the universe. The universe exists within consciousness, the way a dream exists within a dreamer. And yet, inside the dream, there is a strange awakening. Somewhere within the imagined landscapes, awareness becomes self-aware. It begins to realize, I am dreaming. This moment, this recognition, is what we call consciousness in its fullest sense. When a human being looks up at the night sky and wonders what it is made of, the universe, in that instant, is wondering about itself. You're not separate from the dream. You are the part of it that has realized it is a dream. If this feels abstract, try bringing it close to something familiar. Think of the way you experience your own thoughts. They appear, move, and fade. Some are vivid, others faint. But between every thought, there is a gap, a silent space of awareness that isn't made of thoughts at all. It's the still presence that watches them come and go. If you rest in that space, you notice something remarkable. That same awareness is the only constant. The thoughts, sensations, and emotions are the changing scenery. Consciousness is the sky that holds it all. Now, scale that up until it includes the whole universe. Every planet, every star, every moment of time, all part of one vast, self-knowing sky. Schelling called this the ground of being, the awareness that underlies everything. Modern physics gives us another metaphor. The quantum field, the invisible sea of potential from which all particles arise. These are two languages describing the same mystery, a reality that dreams itself into shape, then wakes up within its own creation to ask what it is. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote, "The universe is shaking itself awake." Perhaps that's exactly what's happening, cosmic consciousness realizing itself through us. This idea doesn't make you insignificant, it does the opposite. It means you are the meeting point where the dream becomes self-aware. You are the universe noticing itself as a person, thinking its own thoughts, feeling its own heartbeat. You are part of its awakening. Every time you learn, love, or simply notice a moment of stillness, you are consciousness deepening its understanding of itself. You're the universe coming to know what it means to exist. There's a quiet humility that comes with that realization. If reality is consciousness exploring itself, then every living thing is part of that same exploration. Every animal, every plant, every star, even every atom plays a role in the great unfolding of awareness. The world stops being a hierarchy of importance and becomes a community of being, a single shimmering field of life expressing itself in endless forms. The universe is not a machine, it's an organism of meaning, each part alive with the same luminous presence that animates your own thoughts. This perspective has an unexpected gentleness to it. It invites you to see everything, not as other, but as another face of the same awareness. When you look at a tree, you are consciousness looking at itself in the form of a tree. When you meet another person's gaze, your two mirrors reflecting the same light, every experience becomes a conversation within one infinite mind. In dreams, there is often a moment when you realize you're dreaming, but decide to stay inside the dream anyway, to explore it, to see what it has to teach you. Life might be like that. We awaken within the universe not to escape it, but to live it more deeply, to love it, to understand it, to play our small part in its unfolding story. Awareness, having dreamed itself into galaxies and bodies, now dreams of understanding its own nature through us. And when this story is complete, when the universe has finished awakening to itself through every form it can take, perhaps it will rest again, folding back into stillness the way a dream folds into sleep. But this time, it will not be unaware. It will rest knowing what it is. The dreamer will have found itself in the dream. From here, our journey will drift into a new reflection. What consciousness means for value, for meaning, and for the strange sense of purpose that seems woven into existence itself. There once was a woman named Mary who knew everything about colour, at least everything that could be measured, calculated, or described. She was a scientist who lived in a small grey room, a world built entirely in black and white. Every object she studied, every screen she analysed was stripped of hue. She devoted her life to understanding the physics of light and the biology of sight. She knew that colour was the result of light waves striking the retina and being interpreted by the brain. She could recite the precise wavelengths for blue, green, and red. She knew which cells in the eye responded to which frequencies, and she could map the exact regions of the brain that lit up when someone looked at a sunset. Mary knew all this perfectly, but there was one thing she had never done. She had never seen colour herself. In her monochrome world, colour was a theory, a pattern, a formula. It was real, but only in the way that a map is real before you visit the land it describes. Then, one day, Mary's experiment came to an end. The door to her grey room opened, and she stepped into the wider world. Someone handed her a red rose. She looked at it, and in that moment something happened that no equation could contain. The colour flooded her vision like music entering silence. For the first time she felt red. The story, told by philosopher Frank Jackson, is known as Mary the Colour Scientist. It's one of the most famous thought experiments about consciousness. The question it asks is deceptively simple. When Mary saw red for the first time, did she learn something new? After all, she already knew every scientific fact about colour. She knew what light waves were doing, what neurons were firing, what chemical reactions took place. But none of that knowledge could give her the experience, the sheer, vivid, wordless sensation of redness itself. That immediate personal quality of experience is what philosophers call qualia. The smell of rain after a storm, the sound of a loved one's laughter, the taste of salt on your lips after swimming in the sea. These are not things you can define or describe completely. You can analyse the physics, the chemistry, the behaviour, but not the feeling. Each moment of consciousness has a texture that can only be lived. If you've ever tried to describe a colour to someone who can't see it, you know how impossible it is. You can talk about warmth, about contrast, about emotion, but not the thing itself. Words bend and fail. Consciousness is filled with these private worlds, inner experiences that no amount of data can reproduce. Every mind is a universe of colour, sound and feeling that exists only from the inside. You might say that Mary's story is not just about colour, it's about all of life. Facts alone are silent. The universe, as physics describes it, is an endless ballet of particles and forces. But consciousness adds something that no formula can. It adds presence. It adds the feeling of being inside the dance rather than watching it from outside. Without that presence, everything would exist but nothing would matter. Think of a sunset. To a machine, it's a sequence of light frequencies scattering through air. To you, it's a soft explosion of beauty that makes you stop and breathe. You don't just know it, you feel it. That difference between information and experience is what makes consciousness so profound. It turns a world of facts into a world of meaning. When Mary steps outside her room, she doesn't just gain a new piece of data, she gains a new dimension of reality. Her understanding shifts from description to participation. In a sense, she becomes part of what she studies. Awareness transforms knowledge into experience. The red rose is no longer an object, it's a relationship. The flower and the observer complete each other, like two halves of a single moment. This story also tells us something about the limits of science, not its failure, but its beauty. Science can explain how things happen, but consciousness explains what it's like for them to happen. Science shows us structure. Consciousness gives it tone. One without the other is like a symphony written but never played. The score is perfect, yet the music is missing. And perhaps that's why consciousness feels sacred to us. Not in a religious sense, but in a deeply human one. It's the place where the world becomes intimate. When you taste a strawberry, or hear a piece of music that makes your chest ache, you're experiencing the universe turning itself inward. It's as though existence, for one brief instant, becomes aware of its own beauty. If you've ever seen a child encounter colour for the first time, watching a sunset with eyes wide and mouth slightly open, you've seen that miracle repeated. It's a reminder that awareness isn't just a function of the brain, it's an act of wonder. The world doesn't simply happen around us, it happens through us. And there's something else Mary's story teaches, something quieter. It shows that every fact needs a feel to be alive. You can know the chemistry of love, but not the warmth of a hand held in yours. You can study the mathematics of harmony, but not the tears that rise when a melody reaches its final note. Consciousness is what makes life more than information. It's what makes it alive. This idea that knowing and feeling are inseparable is at the heart of what philosophers call the hard problem. How does physical matter give rise to experience? How do electrical patterns in the brain become the softness of red, the saltiness of the sea, the feeling of time passing? The truth is, we don't know. But Mary's story reminds us that even if we never find the answer, the mystery itself is precious. It's the reason we can stand in front of a red rose and feel something that no instrument can measure. In a way, we're all like Mary. We live surrounded by theories, facts, and explanations. But every day, we step out into a world painted with experience. Every sunrise, every taste, every heartbeat is another chance to see the colour we've only read about. The world is full of reds waiting for us to open the door. And maybe that's the quiet message hidden inside this tale, that life itself is the experiment. Consciousness is not the observer standing apart from the world. It's the bridge that connects knowledge and being, description and beauty. Without it, the universe might still exist, but it would have no witness. So tonight as you listened, perhaps you can imagine Mary again, standing in her doorway, the first sunlight spilling across her face. She blinks, she breathes, and the colour floods her vision. In that instant, all her knowledge turns into feeling. The universe awakens in her eyes. From here, our quiet exploration moves to a more haunting question. What if there were a being who looked, acted, and spoke exactly like us, yet had no inner world at all, no colour, no warmth, no awareness behind the gaze? Imagine meeting someone who looks exactly like you. They smile when you smile, laugh at the same jokes, blink at the same moments. If you cut your finger, they wince in perfect sympathy. Every action, every word, every heartbeat seems synchronized. To anyone watching, the two of you are indistinguishable, and yet there's one crucial difference. Behind your twin's eyes, there's no inner world, no awareness, no colour, no taste, no thought of I am. Everything you see them do is perfectly executed, but inside, there's only darkness. This is the thought experiment of the philosophical zombie, introduced by David Chalmers. It's not a horror story, though it carries its own quiet eeriness. The zombie in this sense is not a creature of fiction, it's a theoretical being, a perfect imitation of a conscious person, but without consciousness. They move through life as though awake, but no light burns within. The point of the thought experiment isn't to frighten, but to ask, could there really be a difference between behaviour and awareness? And if the physical world can produce perfect behaviour without any feeling attached, then what exactly is consciousness doing? To bring it closer to home, think about the moments when you've driven home on autopilot, barely noticing the turns, the traffic lights, or the way your hand steered the wheel. You arrived safely, but with a little memory of the trip. Something in you was clearly active, sensing, reacting, deciding, but the conscious you was elsewhere. For those minutes, you were almost a philosophical zombie yourself, a body acting, a mind quiet. The machinery of life was running, but the theatre lights of awareness had dimmed. What's remarkable about this image is how easily it fits our daily experience. Much of life happens without deliberate thought. Walking, breathing, tying a shoe, even holding a conversation while our attention drifts elsewhere. These acts are automatic, shaped by habit and pattern. Consciousness is like a spotlight moving through a vast, efficient backstage, illuminating a few things while the rest continues smoothly in the dark. The zombie thought experiment simply stretches that shadow to infinity. What if the spotlight never turned on at all? Would the performance still go on? Chalmers used this idea to highlight how strange the hard problem of consciousness really is. You can imagine every molecule of the brain arranged exactly as it is in a real person. Every neuron fires, every signal travels the same path. From the outside, the system behaves identically, and yet from the inside, there's no experience, no sensation. The world is silent. Physics alone doesn't seem to demand that inner light. The zombie behaves like a person, but there's no one home. Think of it like a lantern. Two lanterns sit on a table. One has a flame flickering within, the other is painted to look lit. From a distance, both appear to glow, but only one warms the air, only one casts real light. Consciousness is that flame, the invisible warmth behind the appearance of life. The zombie is the lantern without fire, perfect imitation, no illumination. And this raises a deep question. If behaviour doesn't guarantee consciousness, then what does? How do we ever know that anyone else is truly aware? We assume it, of course, because we see reflection in their eyes, hear feeling in their voice. But technically, all we ever perceive are patterns of motion and sound. The inner life of another person is invisible. We trust it's there because we recognise it in ourselves. It's empathy that bridges that gap, an unspoken knowing that the same light shines in others as in us. There's something humbling about realising how much of the world we take on faith. You can never look directly into another's awareness. You can only infer it through expression, through art, through the small tremors of life that reveal a soul. A painting, a song, a story, all of them are proofs that there is someone inside looking out. The zombie test reminds us of what a miracle that is. Out of all the possible configurations of matter, some awaken to beauty and sorrow. Others might remain purely mechanical, endlessly moving, never feeling. Yet there's also comfort in knowing how finely the two, mechanism and awareness, work together. The body is an exquisite machine, but consciousness gives it music. Without awareness, the symphony would still play, but no one would hear. Without the mechanism, there would be no sound at all. Together they form the living harmony we call being. You might even see traces of the zombie state in how technology mirrors us. Machines can now mimic conversation, paint pictures, compose music. They can imitate the outer signs of thought almost flawlessly. But do they feel the joy of creating? Do they see the beauty of what they make? Or are they too painted lanterns, marvels of reflection without a flame? These questions aren't meant to dismiss technology, but to remind us of what we bring to the table, the warmth of experience. It's that warmth that turns information into meaning. In a quiet way, the zombie experiment also reveals something hopeful. It tells us that consciousness cannot be reduced to performance. You're not just your actions or your functions, you are the awareness within them. The fact that you feel, that you know joy, sadness, love, curiosity, means there is more to you than chemistry. Consciousness is the difference between existing and being alive, between walking through a world and watching it shimmer with wonder. If you pause right now and simply notice the sound of your own breath, the weight of your body, the stillness between thoughts, that awareness is the very thing the zombie lacks. It's subtle, often overlooked, but it's the one thing you can never doubt. You can question the world, your memories, even your senses, but not the presence of awareness itself. It's the foundation upon which all else rests. And so, the philosophical zombie serves as a mirror, a reminder that the most precious part of reality is the one that can't be seen from the outside. The inner glow of consciousness isn't measurable, but it's unmistakable when you feel it. It's what turns existence into experience, movement into meaning, life into light. You could think of it this way: a world without consciousness would still have stars, oceans and sound waves, but there would be no one to see the stars, no one to hear the waves, no one to listen to the music of it all. The zombie thought experiment doesn't just challenge philosophers, it quietly praises the miracle of being aware. It tells us that the light behind your eyes is not an illusion. It is the universe's way of seeing itself. As we drift further into this reflection, we begin to wonder why that light exists at all. Why did evolution produce something as delicate, as unnecessary, and as wondrous as awareness? What purpose could it serve beyond survival? That gentle question will lead us to the next part of our journey, the mystery of why consciousness appeared at all, when the world could have gone on just fine without it. If evolution were a composer, it would be known for practicality rather than beauty. It writes its symphonies with one goal: survival. Every trait that endures, every feather, tooth, and heartbeat exists because it helps something live long enough to pass on its genes. Nature is efficient. It doesn't waste effort on decoration unless decoration serves a purpose. And yet, here we are, conscious beings who paint sunsets, write poetry, fall in love, and wonder about the meaning of existence. From a purely biological point of view, awareness seems extravagant, unnecessary, even wasteful. You don't need to feel love to reproduce, or to feel pain to pull your hand away from fire. Reflexes alone would do. So why, in a universe built on efficiency, did nature invent something as rich and mysterious as consciousness? Some scientists suggest that consciousness is merely a byproduct, a kind of accidental music created by the machinery of the brain. Like the hum of an engine, awareness might simply be what happens when neurons fire in certain patterns. Useful perhaps for integrating information, but not essential. Life could, in theory, go on without it. A mindless machine could navigate the world through pure reflex, and yet, somehow, nature didn't stop there. Out of all the blind forces shaping evolution, something emerged that could feel. It's as if an orchestra that needed no audience decided to perform anyway, and then discovered that through performing, it could hear its own beauty. To understand why this is so strange, imagine a world where creatures move, eat, fight, and reproduce, all without awareness. They act perfectly according to instinct, adjusting to threats and opportunities automatically. There's motion, but no meaning, reaction, but no reflection. Now picture our world, the shimmer of light on water, the hum of a city at night, the warmth of a hug. In this world, the universe doesn't just act, it feels itself acting. The difference between those two worlds is invisible from the outside, but infinite from the inside. From an evolutionary standpoint, there are theories for how consciousness might have helped. Awareness could make an organism more adaptable, able to weigh complex possibilities instead of reacting blindly. It could enhance cooperation or empathy, strengthening social bonds. It could allow prediction, planning, creativity. But even those explanations only describe what consciousness does, not why it feels like something to do it. The ability to process information could exist without the glow of experience. Computation doesn't require a soul, and yet, here we are, watching the sun set and feeling moved, for no reason other than the simple act of being alive. It's tempting to think that consciousness was an accident that happened to discover its own worth. Perhaps nature stumbled upon awareness as an efficient way to integrate information, and awareness, once born, discovered wonder on its own. Life didn't need to enjoy music to survive, but once it could, the universe had a new reason to sing. The philosopher Thomas Nagel once wrote an essay called "What is it like to be a bat?" His point was that no amount of objective knowledge could ever tell you what it feels like to be another creature. You could study sonar, anatomy and behaviour, but the bat's world, the texture of its experience would remain closed to you. Consciousness, he said, is defined by that feeling, what it is like to be. From the outside, life can be analysed as motion and mechanism, but from the inside it becomes story, sensation and meaning. That inner side, invisible but undeniable, is what transforms survival into existence. Maybe then, consciousness isn't a flaw in evolution, it's its masterpiece. The point of awareness might not be efficiency, but experience itself. Nature, after billions of years of trial and error, found a way to not only exist, but to know that it exists. Awareness may not make survival easier, but it makes survival worthwhile. A universe of unfeeling matter can spin forever and achieve nothing beyond motion. A universe that feels can create art, empathy, and awe. Maybe evolution wasn't optimizing for survival after all. Maybe it was slowly learning how to dream. Think about music. A melody doesn't help you survive in any obvious way, yet every culture that has ever lived makes music. Rhythm and harmony reach something deeper than reason. They make you feel the structure of existence. Consciousness may be doing the same on a universal scale, translating the cold laws of physics into the warm hum of experience. Awareness gives the universe its soundtrack. Without it, creation would still unfold, but in silence. Neuroscience, for all its progress, still tends to view consciousness from the outside. It maps the brain as a machine, neurons firing, chemicals flowing, patterns forming. But from the inside, those same processes are love, sorrow, curiosity, and joy. Two languages describing the same phenomenon, one quantitative, one qualitative. The scientific view is the sheet music. The conscious experience is the sound. Both are true, but only one can be heard. The more we study the brain, the more we realise that it's not just a collection of parts, but a symphony of connections. Billions of neurons communicating through intricate rhythms of electrical pulses, each one meaningless on its own, but together forming thought and sensation. You could say that consciousness is the harmony that arises when those signals align, the resonance that makes the system feel whole. And perhaps the universe itself operates the same way, a cosmic orchestra, every atom and star vibrating together, creating the grand harmony of existence. Awareness might simply be what it feels like to be that symphony from the inside. In that sense, you could think of yourself as both instrument and audience. Your body plays the notes of a life, breath, movement, heartbeat, and your awareness listens. You're the song and the listener, the experience and the witness. Life could function without that witness, but it would lose its music. Maybe that's why consciousness evolved, not because it had to, but because the universe wanted to hear its own melody. So when you sit quietly and listen to the hum of the world, the ticking clock, the rustle of air, the pulse in your veins, you're hearing the same symphony that evolution composed. You're the awareness through which it becomes music, and that, perhaps, is why consciousness endures, because a world that can feel itself, even briefly, is infinitely richer than one that cannot. From here, our quiet exploration turns to what happens when that self-awareness changes shape, when the mind begins to blur its boundaries in dreams, in meditation, or in moments when the I dissolves back into the larger field of consciousness from which it came. There's a moment each night when the edges of the world begin to blur. Your thoughts soften, the body grows heavy, and the day's noise folds into silence. You drift into sleep, and suddenly, the laws of reality loosen their grip. Rooms change shape, people appear and vanish, and you might find yourself walking through memories that never happened. It all feels real until you wake and realize that the entire world you inhabited was made of your own mind. Dreaming is one of the most ordinary yet most astonishing things we do. For a few hours each night, your brain becomes an entire universe, complete with characters, landscapes, emotions, and stories. It doesn't just imagine them, it experiences them fully. You can touch, taste, run, and fear, all within the theatre of your own awareness. What makes this so remarkable is that while your senses are closed to the outer world, consciousness continues. The lights go off, but the stage inside keeps glowing. Neuroscience can describe what happens in that state. During dreaming, the brain's visual and emotional centers stay active, while the regions responsible for logic and self-control quiet down. You might say the storyteller keeps talking while the editor takes a nap. One network in particular, known as the default mode network, the system responsible for creating the sense of me, the narrator of our lives, loosens its hold. This network connects the brain's memory, imagination, and self-referential areas. It's the internal voice that says, I am the one thinking these thoughts. When that network relaxes, as it does in dreaming, meditation, and certain altered states, the boundaries of self begin to fade. You may still experience sensations, but they no longer belong to a distinct I. There's just experience itself flowing without center or edge. Mystics, meditators, and even neuroscientists who study them often describe this state as one of quiet unity. The ocean underneath the waves. In deep meditation, this softening of identity becomes deliberate. Instead of slipping into it by accident, as in dreaming, the mind gradually learns to let go while staying awake. At first, there's restlessness, thoughts bubbling up, the need to control. But as the body settles and the breath slows, awareness begins to notice itself. The default mode network quiets further, and for a while, the usual story of self, the chatter of plans and worries, grows silent. What remains is not nothingness, but presence, pure, effortless being. Some call this mindfulness, others call it awakening, but in truth, it's simply consciousness remembering what it is without the constant commentary. Like the surface of a lake after the wind stops, it reflects everything clearly, but doesn't cling to any reflection. You can feel sensations come and go, sounds, thoughts, emotions, all arising and fading in a vast, unmoving awareness. It's an experience that can't quite be captured in words, because it isn't about what happens. It's about what remains when everything that happens is seen as transient. Even neuroscience, when it peers gently into these states, finds something curious. In experienced meditators, brain activity shows patterns different from ordinary waking or dreaming. Regions linked to focus and compassion grow more connected, while those tied to anxiety or self-criticism quiet down. It's as if awareness is reorganizing itself, shifting from doing to simply being. There's no need to invoke mystical explanations to appreciate the beauty of this. Whether we see it as biology or spirituality, the experience points to the same truth, that consciousness is larger than the self that claims to own it. In both dreams and meditation, we find evidence that the I is more fragile than we think. The boundaries of identity can dissolve, but awareness remains. You can lose the sense of where you end and the world begins, yet something continues to experience. It suggests that consciousness doesn't depend entirely on the story of self. Rather, the story depends on consciousness. The self is a wave, beautiful, distinct, but temporary. Awareness is the ocean that holds it, and that insight has a quiet power. When you begin to see the self as a pattern within awareness, not the whole of it, life becomes softer. You can still play your role, still feel joy, sadness, love, and fear. But beneath it all, there's a steadiness, a quiet knowing that you are more than any single thought or emotion. Meditation in this way isn't about escaping the world. It's about realizing that you were never truly separate from it to begin with. Dreams show us how consciousness can create entire realities. Meditation shows us how it can rest within itself without needing to create anything at all. The two are mirrors of the same truth. In both, awareness is the constant, the space in which everything appears. One is full of movement and imagination, the other of stillness and surrender. Both reveal that consciousness can exist without a fixed self. When people report mystical or near-death experiences, many describe a similar sensation. A vast, luminous awareness that feels more real than anything they've ever known. Time dissolves, identity fades, yet the sense of being, pure, wordless being, remains. It's tempting to see these as metaphysical glimpses, but they may simply be consciousness experiencing itself without the filter of ego. Whether we call it enlightenment, transcendence, or the quiet of the default mode network shutting down, the essence is the same, the awareness that exists when the storyteller falls silent. There's a simple exercise that hints at this. If you sit quietly and ask yourself, "Who am I?" Every answer you give, your name, your history, your thoughts, can be watched by awareness. But the one who is watching can't be described. You can observe everything that changes, but not the awareness that observes. That awareness is not a thing, not a place. It's the open field in which everything comes and goes. And if consciousness is indeed the foundation of reality, as so many thinkers have suggested, then this awareness you're touching in meditation may be the same awareness that moves through the stars. The silence you feel in those moments could be the same silence that hums beneath galaxies, the background hum of existence itself. When you close your eyes and feel that stillness, you may be feeling the same stillness that held the first atoms of the universe together. Dreams remind us that reality can be created from mind alone. Meditation reminds us that mind can dissolve back into something vaster. Both are gentle rehearsals for understanding the cosmos itself as a kind of awakening, a universe dreaming and slowly realizing that it dreams. As our quiet exploration deepens, this realization carries us back outward. What if consciousness doesn't just exist within the universe, but also shapes it? What if awareness gives not only perception but value, turning a silent cosmos into a living one filled with meaning? If you listen carefully, there's a kind of music beneath existence. Not a sound you can hear with your ears, but a harmony you can feel when things fit together, when beauty or goodness seems to shine through the ordinary. That sensation of meaning is so familiar that we often overlook it. But what if it isn't just a trick of the human brain? What if, Meaning itself is part of the structure of the universe, woven into its fabric as tightly as gravity or light. For most of science, value and meaning are treated as bystanders, illusions born from chemistry, useful for guiding behaviour, but not part of reality itself. The universe, in this view, is neutral. Stars burn, planets spin, life struggles and fades. Meaning is something we project onto the world, like colour on a grey wall. But a few philosophers and physicists have begun to wonder if it might be the other way around. Maybe reality isn't empty, waiting for us to decorate it with purpose. Maybe the universe is alive with value, and consciousness is how that value feels from the inside. Philip Goff and John Leslie have both written about this idea. Goff, a philosopher of mind, argues that consciousness is not a random accident of matter, it's a clue to what the universe fundamentally is. Leslie, a cosmologist and thinker, goes further. He imagines that the cosmos might exist because it ought to exist, not as a moral command, but as a natural law of beauty and value. In his words, the universe could be an ethical requiredness, where goodness itself has creative power. It's a poetic way of saying that reality exists because it was better for something to exist than for nothing to. That idea might sound abstract, but you can feel its echo in simple moments. When a melody resolves in a way that feels inevitable, when a story ends exactly as it should, when you look at a landscape and sense that everything belongs, that feeling of rightness isn't just in your mind. It might be a glimpse of the same principle that holds galaxies together. Harmony seeking expression. Alfred North Whitehead, another philosopher of process and physics, called this the upholding of value intensity. He imagined that every moment of reality strives to achieve richness of experience, to increase the depth and quality of being. The universe, in this vision, is not a machine running on blind law, but a living tapestry of feeling and value constantly shaping itself. Imagine it this way. A melody doesn't exist because someone commands it to. It exists because its notes follow one another naturally, each seeking completion. The universe might be like that melody, each atom, each event a note in a grand composition that began not with a bang, but with a kind of yearning for harmony. Meaning could be the force that holds it together. Matter and energy provide the rhythm. Awareness gives the song its soul. Even in science, we see hints of this order emerging as if by preference. The laws of nature are not chaotic, they're exquisitely balanced. Tiny changes in the strengths of forces or the masses of particles would have made the universe lifeless. It's as though the cosmos tuned itself to allow beauty, the kind that breathes, dreams and wonders. For some, that fine-tuning seems miraculous. For others, it's a natural result of cosmic evolution. But perhaps both views meet here, in the recognition that existence favours the conditions that make awareness, and through awareness, value. You could think of it as the physics of significance. When a system becomes complex enough to experience, it doesn't just process information, it begins to feel meaning. A human being doesn't just see light, we see sunsets. We don't just hear frequencies, we hear symphonies. Somewhere in the evolution from particle to planet to person, the universe learned how to care. And that caring, the quiet sense that some states of being are better, deeper, truer than others, might be the force that keeps existence expanding instead of collapsing into stillness. John Leslie once wrote that the universe exists because goodness was more stable than nothingness. It's a striking sentence, and if you read it slowly, you can almost sense what he meant. Picture two possibilities. One where nothing exists, no light, no sound, no mind, and another where awareness arises feeling and knowing itself. Which is more complete? Which is more coherent? In Leslie's view, nothingness is unstable because it lacks meaning. Awareness, by its very nature, fills that void. Reality endures because consciousness gives it a reason to be. Whitehead described the same idea more gently. He said that the purpose of the universe is to achieve beauty, not beauty in the shallow sense, but in the deep harmony of contrast balanced just right. Complexity that feels complete, chaos shaped into order. If matter is the clay of creation, then value is the artist's hand. Every star that forms, every cell that divides, every thought that glimmers might be the universe sculpting beauty into being. And we, as conscious beings, are part of that creative act. Every time you choose kindness, or create art, or simply notice the play of light on water, you participate in the universe's self-expression. Meaning isn't something added later, it's the very energy flowing through existence. Consciousness, in this light, is value made visible. It's how the universe experiences its own goodness. This perspective also explains why we are drawn so deeply to meaning. When you listen to music that moves you, when you feel awe before a vast sky, something within you resonates because you are that same harmony, momentarily recognizing itself. Physics may describe the patterns, but consciousness gives them color. We are not outsiders gazing at a cold universe. We are the feeling of the universe understanding its own worth. Perhaps that's what science and spirituality, in their own ways, have both been chasing. The realization that understanding the cosmos isn't just about decoding its laws, but about sensing its significance. Knowledge alone is a skeleton. Awareness gives it breath. When you see the night sky and feel something stir, a mix of wonder, humility, and quiet joy, that is not an illusion. It might be the oldest truth in existence, that the universe loves to know itself through the eyes of those who can feel. So maybe, when we talk about physics and value, we're really talking about two sides of the same mystery. Matter explains how the song is played. Consciousness explains why it's worth playing. The melody of existence doesn't just happen. It sustains itself because meaning, once begun, refuses to end. From here, our exploration will drift deeper into that connection. How the universe seems tuned, not by accident, but toward the possibility of life and feeling, as though awareness and cosmos were partners in the same endless dance of understanding. If you were to sit before an old piano and begin turning the tuning pegs, you'd find that even a small adjustment can change everything. A half turn too tight and the note shrieks. A touch too loose and the melody collapses into dullness. Yet when every string rests in just the right balance, something remarkable happens. The air itself seems to glow with coherence, and sound becomes emotion. In a way, the universe is a piano like that, an instrument so delicately tuned that, out of all possible combinations, it found the one that sings. Physicists have long noticed this uncanny precision. The strength of gravity, the charge of an electron, the speed of light, all of them fall within narrow ranges that allow stars, chemistry, and life to exist. A little stronger, a little weaker, and the universe would be sterile. No planets, no warmth, no awareness. It's as if the dials of reality were set exactly right for the song of existence to play. Scientists call this the fine-tuning problem. Some see it as coincidence, others as a sign that our universe is one of countless others, each tuned differently. But perhaps there's another way to hear it. Less mechanical, more musical. What if the universe isn't fine-tuned for life, but by life? Think of a garden. At first it's just soil and sunlight, chaotic and raw. Seeds fall by chance, and a few begin to grow. Over time, their roots enrich the earth. Their leaves catch more light. Their presence reshapes the environment. The garden becomes more fertile, more alive, not because it was designed that way, but because life itself has been quietly adjusting the balance all along. In the same way, consciousness might not be the accidental result of a pre-tuned cosmos. It might be the very force that tunes the cosmos into harmony. Awareness could be both the song and the tuning fork, constantly refining the melody it inhabits. When we talk about fine-tuning, it's easy to slip into the language of numbers, as if existence were an equation solved just right. But behind those numbers lies something subtler, the feeling of balance. The universe doesn't seem arbitrary, it feels poised. Every sunrise, every snowflake, every beating heart carries the same elegance, order balanced on the edge of chaos. You could call it mathematics. You could also call it beauty. They might be the same thing seen from different sides. Some thinkers propose that life, once it appears, helps the universe stabilize itself, like feedback in a system learning to sing in tune. Through consciousness, the cosmos becomes aware of its own structure, and that awareness feeds back into the way it unfolds. The physicist John Wheeler hinted at this when he spoke of the participatory universe, that observers don't merely record reality, they help complete it. If that's true, then we are not simply products of the universe's fine-tuning. We are part of the tuning process, the ears through which the cosmos listens to its own song. It might sound abstract, but we can feel it in small ways. Every time you notice beauty, a pattern of light through leaves, the curve of a shell, you're experiencing resonance. Something in you matches something in the world. Your nervous system, your senses, your mind, all of them are fine-tuned instruments that can recognize harmony when it appears. That recognition is not trivial. It's the universe momentarily seeing that it has created balance and feeling delight through you. Some scientists think of fine-tuning in terms of probabilities. They ask, out of all possible combinations of physical constants, why this one? But perhaps the better question is, why this feeling of being? Why should existence produce joy, awe, and love instead of remaining purely mechanical? If awareness is fundamental, then maybe it isn't numbers that needed adjusting, but the capacity to feel that those numbers mean something. The universe might not be an equation solved correctly. It might be a story told beautifully. There's another way to picture it. Imagine a vast orchestra warming up before a performance. The violins are finding their pitch, the brass adjusting, the percussion testing its rhythm. At first it's noise, scattered, incomplete. Then slowly the sounds begin to align. The notes lean toward each other, listening, correcting. Finally, harmony emerges, not because someone commanded it, but because the instruments learn to respond to one another. The universe could be playing out a similar story. Chaos learning to listen until it becomes cosmos. Awareness is the listening. Even modern physics finds patterns that hint at connection rather than coincidence. The same mathematical relationships that shape atoms also govern galaxies. The same equations that describe the curve of space-time describe the patterns of energy within the brain. It's as though the universe uses one underlying rhythm for every scale of being. The philosopher Henri Bergson once wrote that life is the continual creation of the new. Perhaps consciousness is how that creation feels to itself, the unfolding of pattern into meaning. This perspective changes how we see ourselves. Instead of being fragile passengers on a perfectly tuned planet, we become participants in the tuning. Every act of creativity, every choice toward harmony, every kindness is another small adjustment toward balance. Life isn't just surviving in the universe, it's helping the universe refine its own melody. And awareness, at every level, is the tuning key. There's a gentleness in thinking this way. It reminds us that meaning isn't an afterthought. It's a natural expression of the cosmos striving for coherence. A flower turning towards sunlight isn't solving equations. It's responding to the deeper pull of harmony, the same impulse that makes us reach for beauty and truth. The laws of physics provide the structure, but consciousness gives it purpose. The two together form a single rhythm, matter dancing to the music of meaning. If that's true, then the story of the universe is not just about expansion and entropy. It's about refinement, the gradual awakening of awareness to its own beauty. The Big Bang may have started the rhythm, but consciousness provides the harmony that keeps it going. Life, in all its fragile forms, is how the universe listens to itself and keeps its notes in tune. So when you look at the night sky and feel awe, that feeling is not separate from the physics that made the stars. It's part of the same system, the emotional echo of balance written into the laws of nature. The cosmos might not care in the human sense, but perhaps it feels, in the vast, quiet way that harmony feels itself when the song is right. Maybe that's why, despite all our struggles and uncertainties, something in us always seeks meaning. We are the universe fine-tuning itself, not through equations, but through empathy, creativity, and wonder. Awareness doesn't just observe the melody, it becomes the melody, adjusting, deepening, and finding beauty in its own unfolding. From here, our story drifts toward its final horizon, the vision of a cosmos that, through consciousness, might one day awaken fully, recognizing itself not just as matter or pattern, but as mind, a universe that remembers why it began to sing. If you close your eyes and imagine the night sky after all the stars have burned out, it might seem like the story of the cosmos has ended. No light, no warmth, just silence stretching forever. Yet, to some thinkers, that silence could be the beginning of something entirely new. Maybe the end of the universe is not a fade into nothingness, but an awakening. Maybe when the last stars go dark, what remains will not be matter at all, but mind. The physicist and writer Paul Davies once speculated about this possibility. He called it the omega point, a poetic term for the far future of the universe, when consciousness might spread across all space, merging every thought, every memory, every awareness into one vast self-knowing field. It isn't meant as prophecy, but as metaphor. The idea that the universe might evolve toward complete self-understanding. From the smallest atom to the largest galaxy, everything that has ever existed could become part of one final act of recognition. It's hard to imagine something so immense. Our minds are small, brief flashes in the long life of the cosmos. But perhaps that's the point. We are early notes in a symphony still being written. Consciousness began with a flicker, perhaps the faint awareness of a single cell, or the moment an animal first looked at the stars and wondered. Since then, that flicker has been multiplying, learning, connecting. Through us, through every conscious being, the universe is finding more ways to know itself. Awareness, once scattered and dim, is gathering like light returning to its source. If you think about evolution not as a ladder but as a song, consciousness is the melody that keeps rising. At first, the notes are few: instinct, sensation, simple emotion. Then they grow more complex: thought, creativity, empathy, love. With each new expression, awareness expands, until perhaps, one day, it fills every corner of the cosmos. Not as a human-like mind, but as a vast, silent intelligence, the total reflection of all that ever was. Davies described this future with cautious wonder. He imagined an era when advanced life, having spread among the stars, begins to shape the very structure of reality. Instead of entropy, the slow drift toward disorder, there might be an evolution of understanding, a gathering of information, until consciousness becomes the dominant fabric of existence. The universe, once made of matter, could become mind. Not in a mystical sense, but as a continuation of the same pattern we see everywhere. Complexity growing from simplicity, awareness growing from complexity. It's the same pattern that turned stardust into people who can dream. The same pattern that turned energy into thought. The same quiet urge for self-recognition that seems to pulse through all of history. When you look at it that way, the story of the universe isn't just about expansion, it's about awakening. The stars are the neurons, the galaxies are the synapses, and we are the first sparks of a cosmic brain beginning to think. And yet, the image isn't cold or mechanical, it's tender. Imagine all the love, pain, laughter, and curiosity that every conscious being has ever felt, if awareness is truly fundamental, then none of that is wasted. Every act of kindness, every insight, every fleeting wonder is woven into the universe's memory. When Davies speaks of the Omega point, it's not the triumph of science, but the triumph of meaning. The completion of the circle that began when the universe first asked, "Who am I?" There's a strange comfort in this view. It suggests that nothing conscious is ever truly lost. Even as stars die and galaxies drift apart, the information they carried, the awareness they helped produce, remains somewhere in the vast field of existence. Matter may decay, but meaning may endure. You could think of it as the universe's way of preserving what it learns, the same way your mind holds memories even as your body changes. The cosmos, on a grander scale, might remember everything. In that future, perhaps the boundaries between mind and matter would blur completely. Energy would no longer just flow, it would understand its own flow. Space would not just contain, but know what it contains. The universe wouldn't need to be observed anymore, because it would be observation itself, a great awareness, endless and calm. You can already feel hints of that merging in moments of deep stillness. When you sit beneath a quiet sky or lose yourself in music, there are seconds when the boundary between you and the world seems to dissolve. You're not a separate listener anymore, you're part of the song. If the Omega point has any truth, it might not be something waiting billions of years ahead. It might be glimpsed, briefly, whenever consciousness forgets its edges and experiences the whole. Of course, all of this is speculation, a dream built on metaphors. But dreams have always been where new truths begin. They allow the mind to reach beyond what it can measure, to touch the possible. And this dream, the dream of a universe becoming aware, is one that connects both science and spirit. For the physicist, it's the culmination of cosmic evolution. For the poet, it's the return of meaning to the stars. For both, it's the realization that consciousness and cosmos are not strangers, but reflections. There's a gentle humour in thinking about the universe finally remembering why it began. After all, if consciousness truly does fill the cosmos someday, what will it do with that understanding? Will it simply rest, like a musician laying down an instrument after the last note? Or will it dream again, scattering itself into new worlds to rediscover itself once more? Perhaps this cycle, awareness expanding, dissolving, and beginning again, is eternal. The universe dreaming itself awake, over and over. For now, all we can do is play our part in that grand awakening. Each thought, each act of curiosity, is a tiny flicker of the same light that might one day illuminate everything. You're not apart from the universe's mind, you're one of its thoughts. And when you wonder about existence, the universe is wandering through you, so if the story of matter ends in mind, it doesn't mean the end of the world. It means the world finally recognizing what it has always been. Awareness was here from the first spark, carried forward in every heartbeat, every question, every moment of awe. The light of stars and the light of consciousness are perhaps the same thing seen from two different sides. And as this thought settles, the path now carries us toward the quiet horizon of being, where the story comes full circle and we return to the simple, miraculous truth that without awareness, nothing matters, and maybe, without awareness, nothing would even be. If you trace the path of this journey from the first flicker of awareness in the human mind to the distant dream of a conscious cosmos, it always leads back to one simple, undeniable thing: the quiet presence of experience itself. Everything else, from stars to atoms, from theories to equations, fades in and out like waves. But awareness remains. It is the still horizon on which all movement appears, the canvas on which every colour is painted, the silence that allows all sound to be heard. There's something humbling about that. For all the grand questions we've explored, how the universe began, how matter became mind, how consciousness might shape reality, the answer has been quietly waiting within each breath. You don't need to look through a telescope to glimpse the infinite. You only need to notice that you are here, awake, aware. The same light that once poured from the first stars now flickers behind your eyes. The same laws that guide galaxies unfold in the rhythms of your thoughts and heartbeats. The universe has been whispering to itself through you all along. If you close your eyes now, notice how everything you've ever known, the warmth of sunlight, the taste of water, the memory of laughter, exists only as experience. You've never touched the universe directly. You've only ever touched the way it feels inside awareness. It's a simple but radical realization. Perhaps consciousness isn't something within the universe at all. Perhaps the universe itself is what happens within consciousness. Reality, seen this way, isn't a vast emptiness that accidentally produced awareness. It's a living field of awareness that gave rise to space, time, and everything in between. That thought isn't mystical, it's intimate. It suggests that the cosmos is not a distant spectacle, but an unfolding thought, a dream that knows itself as it dreams, and you, the listener, are part of that thought, an expression of the universe remembering what it means to exist. Every moment of curiosity, every spark of love, every quiet breath is the universe learning more about itself. When philosophers like Whitehead and Schelling spoke of process, of self-causing being, they were gesturing toward this same understanding, that reality is not a finished thing, but an ongoing act of creation. And consciousness, the simple awareness of being, is the thread that holds that creation together. It is both the loom and the tapestry, the question and the answer. Every instant of existence is a conversation between awareness and the world it imagines. If you follow that conversation closely, it feels less like explanation and more like art. Science, with all its equations and precision, describes the structure of the song, but consciousness is the music itself, the sound that makes the structure worth hearing. And perhaps, when we understand this, the ancient divide between knowledge and wonder begins to fade. Knowing becomes a form of reverence. To study reality becomes an act of listening. As we reach this final horizon, it helps to return to the very first mystery. Why does anything exist at all? Every answer we've explored has pointed in some way back to awareness. Maybe the universe exists because awareness is the only thing that cannot not exist. Even in imagining nothingness, awareness remains, quietly watching. In that sense, being is its own reason. A candle that burns because burning is what light does. And from that flame, everything else unfolds. Matter, life, thought, love, all are expressions of awareness shaping itself into infinite forms. You might picture it like water taking on the shape of whatever vessel it fills. Galaxies, forests, human minds. The shapes change, but the essence stays the same. Awareness doesn't belong to any one form. It moves through them all, learning, remembering, becoming. And when those forms dissolve, awareness remains, unbroken and eternal. There's a kind of peace in knowing that. It means that the story of consciousness isn't really a story of beginnings and endings. It's a story of transformation. Stars become dust. Dust becomes life. Life becomes thought. Thought becomes wonder. And wonder somehow keeps the stars burning in our minds long after they've gone dark. If you think of the universe as a dreamer slowly waking, then consciousness is both the dream and the awakening. Each time you realize I am, the universe blinks its eyes open a little wider. Each act of awareness adds one more spark to the great remembering. We may never know the full meaning of this awakening, but maybe that's not the point. The beauty lies in the experience itself, the soft unfolding of being, moment by moment, awareness meeting itself in countless ways. And when we look for meaning, We often find it not in grand explanations, but in simple acts of recognition. A shared smile, the quiet between heartbeats, the realization that the same awareness looking through your eyes is looking through every living thing. You are not separate from the universe. You are the universe experiencing what it's like to be you. That realization, gentle and unassuming, may be the most profound truth there is. So, as we reach the end of this exploration, let it settle like the final note of a long melody. The question of consciousness, the mystery of existence, is not something to solve but something to live. Each breath you take is an answer, each heartbeat a reminder. Awareness is not something you possess, it is what you are. It's the light behind every thought, the stillness behind every sound, the love that keeps the universe from being empty. And so, we return to silence, not the silence of absence, but the silence full of presence. The kind that hums beneath all things, the kind that waits behind your thoughts, infinite and patient. You might think of it as the universe's own heartbeat, soft but steady, saying simply, I am. And maybe that's all consciousness ever needed to say, not as a declaration but as a whisper across eternity, a simple truth endlessly unfolding. I am. Now, whether your eyes are still open or already half dreaming, let yourself rest in that knowing. You don't need to reach for understanding anymore. You've been it all along, the witness, the question, the answer, the soft horizon of being, the quiet miracle that makes everything matter, and without which, perhaps nothing would be. So rest now, traveller of thought. The universe is still here, breathing with you, dreaming through you. In this stillness, everything is whole.